Welcome, everybody, to the 6 p.m. City Council meeting of September 3rd, 2019. Let the roll call reflect that all council members are present. I've asked Vice Chair Chaburka to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Please consider joining us in a moment of silence. Thank you. First item on our agenda is Suicide Prevention Week, which will be read by Councilmember Blair.
Yes, thank you, Chair Nadolski. Tonight we have members of the Northern Utah Hope Task Force, New Hope, and I believe Chair Christy Jones is here also. Great. Okay. This is a joint proclamation of the Ogden City Council and Mayor declaring September 8th through the 14th, 2019, Suicide Prevention Week in Ogden City. And it reads, whereas, as Ogden City continues to grow and develop, the safety and well-being of our residents is essential. Unfortunately, suicide has been an increasing problem within our community and throughout the world. Ensuring that members of our community feel loved and valued is of the utmost importance. And whereas, suicide is among the leading causes of death in the United States. In recent years, Utah's suicide rates have increased substantially. Utah has the 5th highest suicide rate in the country, and it is the leading cause of death for youth ages 11 to 17. And whereas, as a community, it is crucial that we help individuals who are in need. This week is an opportunity to reach out to those affected by suicide and ensure that they have the resources and support systems they need. Each member of our community matters, and it is important to the success of Ogden City. And whereas, New Hope Task Force is a coalition of members and volunteers working together to increase suicide prevention and awareness in northern Utah. The task force provides courses, training, and the necessary resources to beat this epidemic. And whereas Ogden City encourages members of the community to work together to increase suicide prevention and awareness. Doing so will enable members of our community to live happier, healthy, and more fulfilling lives. Now therefore be it resolved that the Ogden City Council and Mayor Michael P. Caldwell hereby proclaim September 8th through the 14th, 2019, Suicide Prevention Week in Ogden City. We encourage all residents, schools, businesses, and community groups to recognize the importance of suicide prevention and awareness. We appreciate the efforts of New Hope Task Force and other institutions and organizations that encourage suicide prevention and awareness throughout our community. And Chair, I will go ahead and make a motion that we adopt this joint proclamation.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Blair, seconded by Vice Chair Chaburka to adopt this joint proclamation. This is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you.
Could we have Christy Jones come up and accept this, and all others?
And the committee.
All others in the committee, yeah. Thank you. Come on.
Come on.
Thank you so much for being here. And we'll get a picture with everybody too. I'll shake their hand. I'll shake their hand. How are you? Yes, thanks for being here. How are you?
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, sir.
You can stand in front of the mayor.
Oh, no.
I know, yeah, Marsha.
This is a tall crown.
I don't need it today.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Yeah, you do, yeah, you do.
A little hole.
Great, everyone here.
I'll shake.
Gosh.
Film, Ernie.
Thanks.
Would you like to say a few words?
Christy, we'd love to hear from you. You're good.
My word friend.
Well, to the Ogden City Council, the chairperson, the vice chair, all the council members, and Mayor Caldwell, it's such an honor to have you all recognize us in this fashion. We've been working for the last 13 years on suicide prevention, and we are still seeing too many people lost by suicide. So your attention to this means the world to us, and the support for it. The New Hope Suicide Prevention Task Force started as a teen suicide prevention task force, and we quickly figured out that suicide affects every age group, every race, every ethnicity, every gender. And so we really have expanded to that. We're really strongly working towards helping those who are survivors through our suicide survivor support groups and community education. We feel like if we can educate people on signs, symptoms, what to watch for, what to do, how to react, that we will have a better impact. And then we're also working with our school districts to help our school districts and all of our school partners by teaching a proven effective curriculum in the schools called Signs of Suicide, and then being there for our schools as a resource. And to date, we have reached over 76,000 students since we started teaching in the school districts. And it touches our hearts. Every time we hear about an attempt or a loss, it really breaks our hearts. But then we know that we're impacting people and we're saving lives. In fact, I wanted to tell you, and I don't know, this is probably completely improper, so my apologies, but we have our Suicide Awareness Walk. It's a completely free event. It's coming up in conjunction with Harvest Moon on September 21st. And I would love to leave some of our flyers with the council members and I would like to extend an invitation to all of you to come and join us. We will be over just next door at the Ogden Amphitheater, and your amphitheater staff has been extremely helpful with allowing us to be there this year. It'll be our first time there, and we're very pleased. So thank you for your consideration and for having us here tonight.
And just so you know, inviting us to help save lives is never inappropriate here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Christy, I was just going to ask, on the shirts, it all had I think that's a phone number on there. Is that,
Yes.
do you want to talk a little bit about that number?
So the phone number is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's 1-800-273-TALK, TALK. And that lifeline, we try to spread the word on the National Lifeline that if anyone is in crisis or has a friend or family member in crisis, they can call that lifeline and ask for help. And it goes, in Utah, when you call in, it goes to the University of Utah Neuropsych Institute, and they're trained. And then we also have really pushed the Safe Utah app. Have you heard of the Safe Utah app? So the Safe Utah app is an app that we encourage students to download on their phones, and they can make tips on the app for school safety or for suicide issues. They can institute an almost immediate chat with a trained support person. And the Safe Utah program is funded through the Utah legislature, and it's hosted at University of Utah, and they do an outstanding job and have had a big impact on helping students and also intervening on school safety issues.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
That Utah app is also part of the bullying program that the schools have, and they're very well aware of that. And bullying actually is part of the reason why people commit suicides.
Absolutely. And you're refreshing us about a past initiative between the Junior League of Ogden and the City Council and the school district on bullying. So, perfect. Thank you, Doug. Okay. Next item on our agenda is a request to be on the agenda on homelessness in Weber County. We're joined by the Weber Housing Authority this evening.
Good evening. I am Andy Beatles with the Weber Housing Authority. And we noticed as homeless service providers that we had an increase in our homeless population, and each agency was doing kind of their own thing. So we commissioned as an LHCC to create a strategic plan to help us get on the same page and head in the right direction. We didn't want to end up in the same situation that Salt Lake is in. So we hired Ashley to put our plan together, and so we'd like to have her introduce some of the findings from our plan.
Thanks, Andy. My name is Ashley Barker-Tolman. I started into this field of homeless services actually in 2011 when I worked for the state of Utah. I was a special projects manager for homeless programs statewide, which was an exciting task. I got to take on a lot of the new initiatives within the state, so I can tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly behind the scenes, which we won't go into today. But one of my most enjoyable tasks with that was working in actually communities outside of Salt Lake County, Weber County being one of them. I have a special place in my heart for Weber County as I have quite a bit of family here and roots here as well. As part of this study then, we took a look at the homeless services system across the board in this county and identified those areas where we maybe have some weakness or could use improvement. We certainly have seen an influx in this community, even more than what I had realized when I initially came on to take this project. Since leaving the state, I've been doing consulting work. I have a few federal contracts, several independent contracts. I always try to keep something within the state of Utah, and this was the ideal opportunity for me to maintain that as my work brings me further and further into other areas of the nation that I haven't explored or studied yet. So in looking at the community here on the whole, I think what we see are some things that maybe you already know, that your service providers are dedicated and hardworking, and they're really trying to do what they can with the few resources they have available, but also see a lot of places where there's room for improvement. And one of the things I'm most excited about in Weber County, as someone who has invested interest at this point in time, is that I think there's the greatest potential in this community that is not quite being met, but that consists of a lot of low-hanging fruit, if you will. You have the core components in place with these hardworking service providers who are dedicated and willing to do what they can. It really doesn't take too much more energy or too much more of a push beyond that to have a higher functioning system. We're headed on a little bit of a disaster course here in Weber County is what the numbers come to bear, unfortunately. Homelessness in Weber County, and I was really surprised to see this when I crunched the number, is now proportionately higher per capita than homelessness in Salt Lake County. Only very slightly so, but I think just saying that out loud ought to bring some real concern and questions and hopefully a desire to look more into this particular social issue. We also see the gap of affordable housing for extremely low income households in particular expanding over time, and I really would like to commend the council for that being something that you're taking a look at here within your community through these different sessions over the course of September. And then we're also seeing a decreasing rate of income increase. So with that dynamic, we have greater rent inflation happening within the community, and this group essentially of lower and extremely low income household families is pushed into extreme housing cost burden, which then has a direct impact on your homeless number increases. So if you look at the increase of homelessness, and these numbers are from 2014 to 2018. And this actually draws from two separate sets of data, and they are consistent in terms of their increase, and with that primary increase being in Weber County. From the point in time count, we actually see that the increase of homelessness is higher and faster in Weber County than what it is in the state of Utah as a whole. For those same years, we saw a very slight decrease in the state of Utah as a whole, and we saw also a little bit of a decrease in Salt Lake County. And as I mentioned, the other numbers are fairly similar. So for the point in time count, we saw an increase of 48%. And looking at this other data set, which is a database that then takes individual client records into account over the course of entire years, from 2014 to 2018, we actually saw a 66% increase. That other data source shows increases for also Salt Lake County and for state of Utah. But for the state of Utah as a whole, they had a 15% increase versus, again, I'll mention Weber County's 66% increase in homelessness.
What years? What was that again? Sorry.
So for the state of Utah as a whole, they experienced a 15% increase.
Oh, the year, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, 2014 to 2018.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh, thank you. And Andy is reminding me here that you have a copy of the same packet, and you can find that table on page 7,
Thank you.
which also references the number of homeless, or the percentage of homeless as a percent of the population here in the county. I think an additional concern along with this, as Andy mentioned, we don't want to become Salt Lake County up here in Weber County. We've seen them really struggle with things there. I think a lot of your unique strengths in this community actually make it a totally different conversation. All the more need to make sure that we have people here who are at those state tables as they're discussing homelessness and as they're discussing statewide strategies, because the strategy that they're going to employ in Salt Lake County is not exactly the same strategy that would be most effective here in Weber County. There'll be some common elements in terms of best practice, right? And we want to make sure that we're on the cutting edge of research and information to do what we can with the resources within our community. But we really need to have some local focus and attention if we're going to address the specific needs and dynamics within this community, which again, and as you know, are quite a bit different. One of the concerning numbers also found within this study is the way in which the percentage of homelessness experienced in Weber County. And, you know, I make these references to Salt Lake County because I think we all know that there's a clear problem there. We've maybe seen an increase here, but hearing what the sort of relative growth is compared to the problem we know exists in Salt Lake County, and hearing that the growth is faster here, and also seeing that the proportion of homeless people as a percent of the population is slightly higher here, really is to make a clear point that we need to pay close attention, even though Weber County's population and homeless population is about the fifth that of Salt Lake County. Still relevant. So Weber County hosts approximately 13 to 16% of the state's homeless population. In fiscal year 18, from state funding, they received 8.9% of state homeless funding. That number actually has decreased in fiscal year 20 to about 5.7% of the state's homeless funding. Again, more reason that we need to be really involved, I think, from a leadership perspective here locally, and then being able to bring that leadership on a state level to have some of these conversations. So the other thing that I'd like to point out here is really, again, that relationship between affordable housing and homelessness. So the scope of this strategic plan is really focused on the homeless services system. If you look at the back part of your packet, you'll see Appendix D, which shows you the strategic plan at a glance. There are 5 focus areas. Within each of those focus areas, there are 3 strategies with very specific action items. And if you want to read the full copy, you can read details on each of those. Or I'm sure Andy would love to answer questions in the future, as would I. But really, an important part of those strategies, even though it's really only one piece in the homeless services strategy, is to create a strategy around affordable housing. Your homeless service providers can come together. Your leadership maybe can show up, or, you know, we make strong investments in this community around the homeless services system. But if a similar investment is not made into affordable housing, the homeless services system is not going to be able to perform as well as they could. It's as simple as that. The more housing cost burdened households we have in Weber County, the further increase in homelessness we will see. So even if we're extremely responsive, we offer the type of services that provide maybe the minimal amount of resource needed for someone to end their homelessness, and do this with the utmost of efficiency and high performance, we still will have a significant gap if we're not able to create also a strategic plan around affordable housing. So again, I would like to really commend the council for the work that you're doing and taking a look at that. There are some specific parts of this handout that you have starting on page 7. Talks about this relationship between homelessness and affordable housing, gives some estimates actually of the number of tenants in Weber County that are rent burdened. And these come from the Utah Department of Workforce Services State of Utah Affordable Housing Report from 2018. It was the most recently available at the time of this report. Shows that 44.2% of tenants are rent burdened, and that there are 34.5% that actually pay greater than 35% of their household income toward rent costs. That's where we start to dip into this extremely rent-burdened area. And we see study after study that shows that this is where our homeless numbers increase within a community. Let you take a look at the other components in there, as I know you're going to be focusing more on that particular area. Andy, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of the affordable housing component and how it fits in with the strategic plan?
No, just that they are linked, that one relies on the other.
Great. So I would strongly encourage you, if you have the time, that you can sort of skim through these. I think it's only about 18, 20 pages here, if even that. You can really take a look at those numbers, the relationship between those two systems. And then the last section is actually system performance as it currently stands for this community around homelessness. It explains 7 specific system performance measures. And if you take a look at those, you will actually see that in several areas, we're going in the wrong direction in terms of our performance around homeless services. And each one of these links to challenges within the community that our service providers face right now. There's reference to each of those and also refers to specific recommendations that come forward in the strategic plan and how we can address and improve those performance measures. Anything you'd like to add?
So I hope that we can count on your support for we have a lot of work to do, but we hope that we can count on your support for the implementation of this plan. And I also just want to thank really quickly all of the service providers that are here tonight that showed up. So I appreciate everyone that's here.
Are there any questions from council members?
I have a couple.
Yeah, please.
So you referenced a couple of times that we have an increase in homelessness and that Salt Lake County has a decrease. Could that be that many of those citizens are coming from Salt Lake County?
So I believe that we have anecdotal evidence that might say that, but really it would be a good follow-up question to draw upon information that's within the databases and also look at shelter information, both at Lantern House and at the Road Home to try to further detail that. Anecdotally, certainly, I think our staff and director at the Lantern House can tell you that they do see a lot of movement from Salt Lake. We know that the Wasatch Front Corridor is fairly fluid, but there have not been sort of a concrete numerical study in order to prove that.
Can I just add one other quick question?
Of course, absolutely.
So the other thing you referenced a lot of is and I'm assuming that means Weber County. Did you get Ogden specific at all? Or, I mean, Ogden as a city specific, or just looked at it as a Weber County?
So our LHCC, our Local Homeless Coordinating Committee, commissioned this study. So all the homeless service providers, so Ogden is included in this data.
But the we is Weber County, so it's all
Right.
the cities from West Haven, far west.
Ogden being
Roy.
the majority. The majority of the concentration of homeless individuals are in Ogden City.
So is the data disaggregated by city?
No,
It's
I
not.
don't know.
It's not. It's something that we look at on a local homeless coordinating committee level,
Okay.
and Weber County is the bounds of that. But, I think if you took a look at the service providers that are included in collecting that data, actually, are there any that don't fall within the city limits? So I think really, almost when we look at Weber County data, we're looking at Ogden City data.
Yeah, because there's no service providers outside of Ogden City, so that's where all the data is gathered. I mean, limited amount, I should say.
I think we gather some participants from the other counties, such as Weber and Box Elder, because we're the focal point here. If you have any influence in the people in Salt Lake, if they could fund us more funds, we could probably do more toward that end. But that is the real key ingredients. And I think Marcia had was right with that we are receiving an increased number from Salt Lake City. So it would help if they could increase our funding to go along with that.
I wish I still had influence there. Unfortunately, I don't have any direct influence there. However, Andy has done a really great job in putting this information out. It hit all of the major media outlets in Utah, and I'm fairly certain that my old office took note of that. I also know that Mark has had some conversations also with the State Homeless Coordinating Committee, and in fact, your mayor mayor sits on that committee, and they are the ones who approve the funding allocations. So there is space for influence, but there has to be maybe a little more coordination on this end in order to really have impact with the state and their plans going forward.
Mr. Chair? Yeah. I've got a question that I'm not sure exactly how to ask it.
Sure.
If you get really good at helping homeless, do you attract more homeless?
So that's a good question, and it's not an uncommon one. It's one that a lot of communities will ask as they try to get into this and say, gosh, is this something really that we invest our funds into? The fact of the matter is, when we look at where people are coming from, the vast majority are coming from within the service area. And for whoever mentioned, you're right, you have a little bit of an expanded service area in that your homeless shelter serves all of northern Utah, right? So there would potentially be some ways you can work with other communities to spread that out a little bit. But even in Salt Lake County and Utah as a whole, with all of the press that was received around housing first and affordable housing, I don't know if you caught on to that, would have been, 2015 or so. And we had a lot of people who were saying, oh, great, now everybody's going to come from all over the nation because they've heard this media piece. We really didn't see what you could consider to be a significant increase of people coming from out of state to access those services. There always is a small component, but it is the vast minority, and looking at multiple communities throughout the nation tends to continue to be that way.
Maybe lends to another question that I have.
Please. And I hope that answered what you were asking.
It does kind of.
Okay.
It's not hugely comforting, I guess. But,
sure.
Some cities not around here, West Coast cities that are having huge problems with homeless encampments. And I think Salt Lake was having some of those problems. That's why they did what they did. How do you deal with those kind of things with respects to, I guess maybe my real question is how come that happens in certain places?
Yeah.
It's
a really
you
good
want to make
question.
sure you learn from the lessons that are available.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure you have our citizens certainly want a nice, safe place. We just got done with the session. They want to be able to walk anywhere, any time of the day or night. Homeless tend to impede that. So we've got to make sure we strike a balance, I think, for some of those things. And maybe you've learned some lessons that will help us.
Absolutely. And that's really a lot of what, is interwoven into these strategies. I actually do some work along the West Coast in Washington and Oregon and San Diego specifically. And really what we're seeing, and especially throughout the entire West Coast of the United States, is significant increases of homelessness as a result of the significant decreases in affordable housing. That is the primary factor from those who have studied this issue in detail in those particular areas that is influencing those numbers, that's influencing the heightened number of people who are unsheltered living on the streets actually within those communities. So you have that high population with those needs, and you have really, and I don't know if you've looked at housing costs in California recently. I have a brother who just moved there with his small family for a year. They got a steal deal because they're paying $1,700 a month. They're not even within any major city. They're on the outskirts. They were lucky to be able to pay that. And, I think that we're going to continue to see that, unfortunately, and hopefully we'll also see some pretty impactful strategies. But I think we have an opportunity in Utah to get out ahead of that. Unfortunately, we're moving in the same direction, maybe not as quickly as what California is. We don't have the same sizes of cities. But if you look at our affordable housing and the tract that we're on, I think California could be a cautionary tale for us, even though we have a lot of differences, just in terms of those dynamics and the way in which those variables play against each other.
And what does substance abuse and mental illness have to do with all of this?
That is a really good question. So related in that, we see higher instances of substance abuse and mental illness within the homeless population when we do these counts, right, and collect data from people. I think it also is really important to note that it's not the majority of the homeless population. In fact, even the people we see on the streets are not the majority of the homeless population. So recognizing that it's not one and the same, and that by us addressing, for example, substance use disorders in this community, that doesn't necessarily mean we're addressing the homeless population. It's such a small percentage of the whole. I have a very good, world-renowned friend, actually, who likes to also point out that the vast majority of those who experience mental illness, which is about 1 in 5 in our population here in the state, we're also one of the most underserved behavioral health states in the nation right now. But the vast majority of those who never experience homelessness. Same thing with substance use disorder. It really comes down to what resources you have available to you. So while it's something that is a subset and is written into these recommendations in terms of something that we need to coordinate with your health departments and service providers to ensure that we're addressing, I think it's also kind of helpful to put into perspective that when we say homeless population, we're not talking a group of people who are severely and persistently mentally ill and have substance use disorder all the time. That's a small minority, and they require some specialized care and services to be effective.
Thank you.
This is a topic clearly we could go on for quite
I
a
know.
time
I'm
because
sorry.
Well, no,
I'm trying to be succinct in my responses. Anyway.
And you are, but it's so data rich, but also so important that it certainly justifies more time. But before this meeting, we had a work session with our strategic planning committee. And one of the things that came out of their efforts was the community really wants to see an organized and more deliberate effort at addressing homelessness. And so this strategic plan that you're presenting and discussing tonight has a really timely nexus with where we're headed. And so I do, reading some of the strategies, and I think we can dig into the plan more on our own later, but I see a need for more of your involvement moving forward here. But I can see that there's suggestions like lack of key leadership and backbone support and things where maybe the city needs to be playing a role, and it would be responsive not only to needs but to requests from the community too. So
thrilled to hear that, and Andy would be a great primary point of contact going further. I'm happy to support where I can.
Can I just, do you mind if I just make a little statement?
No,
a comment to what you're saying, because I've been serving on that committee, and I appreciate so much all the work that the service providers in the area coming together, trying to think the best way that we can gather as much funding as we can. But we really have to realize that a lot of our organizations are very stretched with their resources, including people. And so when you have to apply for funding and grants, that takes a certain amount of time and effort. Then you also have to report back on those grants, et cetera. So what we really want to do with this plan and this coordinating effort is to think about how can we help to support, and by we, I mean service providers and governmental, how can we help to support to tell that story? Like you were saying, Councilmember Stevens, can you go ask for it? Well, we also can demand that we get a fair share of the amount of funding across the state because we are providing those services. So, we can do that in our role as just regular citizens, but also as a council to reach out to those folks to really explain that we want to take care of the folks in our community. I think if you look at the tables, which I thought were very revealing, on figure 3, for example, on page 8, and I saw this report given a couple times, so you have to give me that. But in Weber County, you can see the rent growth rate. It looks pretty small because it's 0.5%, but for some folks, that's a really large percentage, right? And then the income growth rate is negative 0.4%. So you can see right there that is a gap, right? A really big gap for folks. So we can think about how we're growing our economic development to help support people to have a little bit higher income in some ways. And then on the next page, there's the figure 4, which shows the affordable housing units per percentage. So we'll see a lot of numbers around this. I know the council was asking, we want to know the inventory of everything that we have. And this is Weber County. If we look at Weber County, we have, in the lower than or equal to 30% of affordable housing units. We have negative 2,540. And as you go across, we have some more in the other categories, which I think is definitely parts of our efforts around the quality neighborhoods, et cetera, the things we have been doing. But then the available housing units, if you look at this, we've got for the equal to or less than 30%, we've got negative 4,095. And even in the 50% range, we have negative 2. So it's definitely not that housing is the only thing that could help support these efforts, but you can see through the numbers that it's definitely related in some way. And so I'm really glad that you came to present to us and show this. And I know that that committee, along with Commissioner Jenkins, have approved this plan moving forward. So they're going to be following this. So I think in any ways that we can think as a municipality to help support that, we should be doing so.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for letting us take the time.
No, thank you so much. Sorry we took more time. I apologize. We apologize to everybody who's
I
here.
think we've gone over, so
Yeah.
if there's any time we can come back and talk further with the council, we would love to.
Okay, I think we'll take you up on that. For anyone who's coming, who is here or staying for our 7 p.m. work session and fact-finding work session, we apologize. It's likely to get to it a little bit late this evening, but we will be getting to it. So the next item on our agenda is a public hearing for fiscal year 2020 budget amendment. I believe that's presented by Lisa Stout.
Oh, she's behind the pole. I can see her moving. I see her arm.
I'm hoping she's behind one of the two. And we have backup support from Brandon Cooper, so I presume. Lisa.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This budget amendment was first presented to you on August 20th, where administration is asking for an appropriation of BDO lease revenue in the amount of $325 to transfer to the RDA. This transfer will help with the purchase of a couple of properties near the Union Station campus to the south of it. The RDA project includes a loan from Golden West Credit Union to the redevelopment agency, and then the remaining funding will come from Ogden City for the closing, some debt service, and also the demolition of the St. Anne Center. The total project will include additional debt service in future years from the city, most likely to the RDA transfer requests, and with a balloon payment in the year 2030 if a developer is not found to purchase the property from the redevelopment agency. But the action before you tonight is a transfer from Ogden City to the RDA in the amount of $345,325. Any questions?
I think we have questions just not related to that.
Okay. The request on the agenda tonight is for you to adopt the resolution allowing for this appropriation and transfer. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Yep, thanks. Okay, this is a public hearing, so if you wish to address the council on this 2020 budget amendment, now is your opportunity. Seeing no movement, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing, Chair.
Second. We have a motion by Councilmember Heyer, second by Councilmember Blair to close the public hearing. This is a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. The public hearing is closed. Comments or questions from council members?
Seeing none, I would make a motion that we adopt proposed ordinance 2019-38.
I second it.
We have a motion by Councilmember Blair, second by Councilmember Stevens to adopt proposed ordinance 2019-38. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Blair?
Aye.
Councilmember Heyer?
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember White?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chaburka?
Aye.
Chair Nadolski?
Aye, that passes. Thank you, Lisa. Next item on our agenda is reports from administration, property conveyance to redevelopment agency. Related item. Mr. Cooper. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I know you have a lot of big topics to cover, so we'll be very brief and succinct. My report this evening is in conjunction with the amendment that was just passed for the fiscal year 2020 budget. It's connected to Resolution 2019-21 related to the approval of land conveyance for the purpose of securing a commercial loan from Golden West Credit Union.
That was very fast. Thank you.
That was very fast.
He was not kidding.
I loved that.
So those two parcels there that are numbered are the two parcels in question. The purpose for the conveyance to the RDA is to use the land to secure a commercial loan for the purchase of other parcels. Now we're going backwards in time. So the RDA has a desire to purchase those parcels there that are numbered consistent or contiguous with two parcels that are currently owned by the city. This is on Binford and Wall Avenue. The loan is from Golden West Credit Union. The property conveyance from the city to the RDA would allow for that loan to take place.
Any questions for Mr. Cooper?
Chair, I just have, will you just, for the record, this isn't St. Anne's as in the Lantern House, it's land that St. Anne's used to own.
Correct. So
clarify
those,
that?
yes, those top parcels, excluding the bottom parcel there that is 0030, those are the St. Anne's Art Covenant owned properties.
And then, just briefly, will you explain why we decided to use a loan and not other revenue, more land or anything like that?
Sure. A debt instrument like this is consistent with purchasing property. It allows for leverage that is not applicable to other types of transactions. So by using debt and using that leverage, we preserve cash that we might have to use in certain situations where cash is only appropriate.
Thank you.
And it would also, there may also be an opportunity for future developers to assume the debt as well and pay off the debt burden.
Right. That note can be assigned, paid off by someone else, whereas cash would be spent.
But the numbers presented were worst case scenario.
Correct.
Should that not happen.
Right.
Okay.
So the amount will go to the Lantern House when we purchase the property. Is that how it's taken care of at that time, or?
The transaction is between the redevelopment agency and St. Anne's LLC.
Okay. So the funds do not go to Lantern House then?
I'm not sure of that relationship. I just know that our contract is with St. Anne's.
And Lantern House doesn't own St. Anne's then?
I do not know for sure.
Okay. I thought it did.
The St. Anne's became Lantern House. That's how they're officially known. I think they still are St. Anne's, known as Lantern House. But this property is in the name of St. Anne's, and so that is why he's saying we're sending the check to St. Anne's. But yes, it will end up with Lantern House.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it. If there's no additional comments or questions, we can entertain action.
Chair, I would make a motion then that we adopt Resolution 2019-21.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Heyer, second by Councilmember Chaburka to adopt proposed resolution 2019-21. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Heyer.
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez.
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens.
Aye.
Councilmember White.
Aye.
Councilmember Blair.
Aye.
Vice Chair Chaburka.
Aye.
Chair Nadolski.
Aye. That passes. Thank you, Brandon. See you here in a minute. Community and Economic Development Department Citizen Participation Plan is the next item on the agenda. Will that be Ward or Kathy? Okay. Ward Ogden.
Hello.
Welcome.
Chair and members of the council. We're here to discuss a citizen participation plan that is a function of our federal grants that we receive. Each year we are an entitlement community for the, did I hit the wrong button? Sorry.
Forward button. Forward.
Oh, the right arrow. Yeah. Okay, here we go. We're an entitlement community for the Community Development Block Grant and the Home Investment Partnership Grant. In order to receive these grants each year, we have to comply with federal regulations. And one of those requirements is a citizen participation process for gaining input and citizen comment and participation in the planning for the use of those funds. So the plan that is being presented is basically outlined for us in the regulations by HUD. They give us the guidelines, they tell us what we have to do, and so we're putting a plan together that meets those requirements. We're not really infusing anything in addition to that. And we have been following these procedures for some years. It involves outreach to citizens, such as public in general, citizen advisory committee, neighborhood groups, faith-based organizations, school groups, et cetera, and then consultation with stakeholders such as lending institutions, businesses, other government agencies, homeless providers, and nonprofits. It includes adoption of the HUD plan, or what we call the consolidated plan, at a public hearing. It provides for a 30-day public comment period. Provides citizens and stakeholders an opportunity to review and review the plans and comment. It requires us to publish in the newspaper a 30-day for that 30-day comment period, so that citizens know about it. And we post that notice as well throughout the community. And then we're required to consider the comments in the plan, public comments that we receive. We've updated the process that we've been following. It's again a new requirement that the City Council adopt this plan. It's been given as procedures that are required in the past. Now we are required to make an adoption of the plan. There's additional outreach efforts that are required, and they include things such as consultation with broadband service providers to try and make sure that we're having connectivity in the community, floodplain and other public lands managers. And then we do an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice that follows the same procedures. And so the analysis of fair impediments is kind of tracking alongside of our consolidated plan process that we're going through this year. Again, as I mentioned, we've been following these procedures for several years, since 1995, as we were required to do the consolidated planning process. And so it's our recommendation that the council adopt the ordinance approving the resolution, approving this plan. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Ward?
Very good. Thank you.
Must have done a nice job. Thank you. Okay. If there's no other comments, again, we can entertain action.
Okay, Chair, I'll make a motion then that we adopt proposed resolution 2019-20.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Heyer, seconded by Councilmember Lopez to adopt proposed resolution 2019-20. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember White?
Aye.
Councilmember Blair?
Aye.
Councilmember Heyer?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chaburka?
Aye.
Chair Nadolski?
Aye. That passes. Next item on our agenda is arts amendments. Welcome back. We'll try not to make you live here too much longer.
It's really nice to see you all again. I am here tonight to ask for your consideration of adopting proposed ordinance 2019-42. And since we've talked about this quite a bit, we'll go through this really quickly. We discussed it in fact-finding session on the 20th and then again in work session last Tuesday. What we're looking at is part of the amendment that you adopted on June 11th, which changed the BDO lease revenue as the funding source for arts and the funding cap and minimum on the public art fund. So this one is just the three additional parts of the amendment. One was the option to place public art on private property, which provides the city the ability to place public art in the most the most advantageous position. I'm sorry, I've just got my tongue tied. For the public to enjoy. So this, of course, would be protected by recorded easements and contracts with the proposed property owners. The city would retain ownership of the art, and then we would have access for maintenance and for the public to enjoy the art. So this would be case by case, of course, and probably not the norm, but within the creative district is probably something we're going to possibly come across. The other two proposed changes are minor public art and special arts grants. So the regular art grant cycle does not change at all. Of course, that's the peach side of the slide. It runs just the same. Funding does not change. The regular public art stays the same as it always has been, but the new proposed ones would be funded out of the public art fund. The minor public art would allow us $30,000 or under to spend on a single or multiple projects. These projects would be city-driven projects and actually have the opportunity for public art calls or public talent calls for the community to be involved in the project. They would be presented to and recommended by the Arts Advisory Committee. And the funding, of course, can only occur if the Public Art Fund has unencumbered funds available. And then these projects would be then reported to you, the council, in the yearly annual report. And then the special arts grant would create a funding mechanism for Ogden City to join in other community partners in supporting very large and high impact projects. These funds are expected to be used very sparingly, only once every few years. But this fund would actually cover the need for projects that would not fall within the regular grant cycle, or projects that the funding needs are in excess of what the regular grant cycle usually could afford. And of course, these projects would need and go through the regular process, just like art grants. They would go through approval through the Arts Advisory Committee and then be recommended to you, the City Council, for approval. Is there any questions on these proposed changes to the amendment?
Any questions?
Okay, I
We
believe.
sure had a lot of questions and got a lot of answers on this topic,
Yes,
haven't we?
it's been a lot.
I know. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you very much.
We do love you, I swear. We promise.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more comments or questions, again, we can entertain action on this item.
Chair, I'll motion that we approve or adopt proposed ordinance 2019-42.
Second.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Taberka, seconded by Councilmember Lopez to adopt proposed ordinance 2019-42. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember White?
Aye.
Councilmember Blair?
Aye.
Councilmember Heyer?
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Vice Chair Taberka?
Aye.
Chair Nadolski?
Aye, that passes. Thank you for your, go home and celebrate however it is you wish best to celebrate.
Chair, maybe you're going to make this comment, but we're joking as much time as we've spent with Lori. She's probably thinks we're family now too. But I want people to know that we really looked at this. I mean, it wasn't just like it came to us. We scrutinized it. We looked at it. She's gone back to the drawing board. So I just want. It's not that we are always just looking at it and saying aye. Yeah. We've really looked at this. So thank you, Lori, for hanging in there with us.
We didn't make it hard for no reason. We made it hard because we care about it so much. So our apologies, but our appreciation as well. And we heard tonight about, through the strategic planning process, how important arts are going to be toward bringing cultures together. So we'll be looking to you and your efforts quite a bit in the future. Okay. Thanks, you guys. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public comments. This is an opportunity to address the council regarding concerns or ideas on any topic. Please, if you wish to comment to the council, please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Malik Dio, Mr. Nadolski. Before I begin, before my time starts, the family has elected me as the point of contact for them, and I would like to know if, for this one session here, if I can get 2 extra minutes to speak. since this is a continuation of what we spoke about last Tuesday.
So family members will not be addressing
Jeff,
us,
family members
just
will be
you
addressing
through-
too, but there's other items that I want to address on our agenda
Okay.
that may take a couple of minutes extra.
Okay. We normally don't do it, but I think we can
Chairman,
make it.
you're
I think there's chair discretion in our rules to allow for it, correct? If you'll be speaking in place of members of the family, we'll.
Then I'll try to keep it to 3 minutes.
No, we'll make that available to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate your graciousness. Okay, so thank you for allowing me to the opportunity to speak again today in reference to the shooting death of Giovanni Mercado by Ogden City Police. I've been chosen by the victim's family as the official spokesperson in the matters concerning this tragic event that happened in our city. We are assembled here today before the council to follow up with our concerns, which Mr. Johnson stated last week he would contact legal, the DA, the mayor, and the chief of police on how to proceed forward with our concerns of use of deadly force in Ogden. And we want to know where he and the council are at with this so far, since a week has passed already. We want to place urgency on this. Okay. We are here. We have recently formed a 7-person committee. It's going to be called the Utah Coalition for Police Reform, and we want to be recognized as such moving forward by the council. Our primary goal is to push for more de-escalation and less lethal force by Ogden City Police Department. We're also requesting regular meetings with you, Mr. Nadolski, to follow up with any advancement or updates to our concerns on a biweekly basis or as needed. We also request that our 7-member committee be given the opportunity to go through the Civilian Police Academy, and we want this to be specialized for our group and for our committee, so we can see what the police go through, and as we proceed with this process for fighting for de-escalation and use of non-lethal force. And at the same token, what we expect is we request that the officers go through a similar training as if they were the civilian encountering the police. This puts the police on the side of the discrimination. 2 examples I can give is a police officer taking this training can be confronted by actors who are acting as police to speak to him in a language that he does not understand and give him commands to see how the person will react. Another example could be the officer could be wearing headphones and not be able to listen to the commands and expect to follow them. And we want this to be equal time training between the both groups. We know Ogden has the money. I've sat on several council meetings. I've listened to this debate. I know how much Mr. Johnson makes. He makes more than the governor of Utah. I know we got the money to put into this to save lives. Okay. We are also wanting to discuss other items on our agenda, such as civilian review boards that we intend to put in place for police shootings, diversity recruitment. For some reason, Ogden can't become diverse with their police hiring. Salt Lake's doing a wonderful job. However, here you can't even count the people of color on one hand in our department. Okay. We also recognize that officers must have a living wage in Ogden, and that's why we can't keep good officers here, because of their low pay. So we're asking for extra pay for officers. Okay. We're asking for foot patrols because the community wants to see our officers face to face. We don't want to see them driving by in a car not knowing who they are, feeling intimidated. We want 211 grants for social workers to go with this to the scene with an officer as needed, because mentally ill people should not be getting incarcerated or arrested. Okay, we want comprehensive body cam policy. There was a man recently shot who had a rock in his hand, and none of the police had his body cams on, and we have to take their word that the man had a rock in his hand and that he was threatening their life. We want transparency with arrest statistics by race. We want traffic tickets that offer the opportunity to put Hispanic on there because they're marking us as white, and there's no way to track by ethnicity who's getting the most tickets. Okay, and most of all, I want to ask the mayor to please ask Randy Watt, the chief of police, to take the cops out from in front of Mr. Mercado's property. They've been camping out there since this shooting. They've been feeling intimidated, and there has been no threats whatsoever, and there's no reason for the cops to be there, and I want Mr. Watt to speak to that as well. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Malik. Thank you. Next.
Chair, just,
Before we get to the next one, sorry.
just remind people of civility, please, if you would, tonight.
Yep. We do have expectations and rules for civility, but we do want to hear from you in a sincere way. So we appreciate your consideration with that, and that's okay. Brandon, Malik, that I'm giving Brandon a card. You said you wanted to meet with me. That has my personal cell phone number on it. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
My name is Nazli Gonzalez, and I'm here speaking on the behalf of my family, and Giovanni Mercado's family. I want to speak about reforms that I think need to be passed, especially for Ogden City. I think we need to demilitarize and get proper training on de-escalation. The use of lethal weapons can give people a feeling like there's an occupying force as opposed to a force that's part of the community that's protecting them and serving them. A good example of improvement is Salt Lake City, swapping out 70 arms, lethal weapons for beanbag guns. Not only does this lower the chance of deadly police-involved shootings, but helps put our community at ease. How can we unite as a community if most of our community is afraid of those who are here to serve and protect us? Another good example is the introduction of non-lethal weapons by Park City Police Department, introducing the Bola Wrap, which shoots 640 feet out, can capture someone's wrist. It does not cause pain, which can lower the chances of it becoming a bigger issue and a bigger problem of these lethal shootings. I also wanted to talk about community policing. It's built on finding ways to optimize positive contact between police officers and community members. It means taking police officers out of their offices and patrol cars and placing them on foot patrols throughout the community. Not only does that enable them to build a presence and personal connections with the local community members before a crime or shooting happens. Salt Lake is a great example of this. They have something that is called Chill with the Cop. It doesn't cost a lot to run these programs. They give out popsicles from 1 to 3, and they talk about issues that are going on in the community. It seems to break down barriers and create a relaxed one-on-one interaction between police and officers and the public without them having to fear for their lives. I also think Ogden City Police needs better racial bias training. The fact of the matter is that Black and Latino people face discrimination at all levels of the criminal justice system. Police officers should be required to explore how their implicit biases, unconscious prejudices, and stereotypes may cause them to use violence against people of color disproportionately. There's no way that racial bias training alone can get rid of racial discrimination and policing, but it will only work against implicit biases to raise awareness about. I think that police chiefs should be the ones that are leading the way for this racial bias training and should be speaking about it, because just talking about it after a shooting doesn't really do anything. Once another shooting happens, it's one after the other. It's something else that's being brought up. I think that's something that they should bring up constantly and not just during shootings. Ogden Police Department needs to end grand jury processes for officers involved in shootings. In most jurisdictions, prosecutors ask grand juries. Well, I guess I'm done.
You can finish your thought if it helps. If you can finish your thought.
Thank you. Ogden Police Department needs to end grand jury processes for officers involved in shootings. In most jurisdictions, prosecutors ask grand juries to consider whether charges should be brought against the defendant, but the process is usually completely secret and the evidence presented is completely at the discretion of the prosecutor. Most prosecutors have relationships with these police departments.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sofia Garza, and I'm also here to speak on behalf of the family. And really, one of the biggest things that we do want to mention here is we know that Ogden can be a leader. I've lived here almost my whole life, and I know that we can be better than this. I know that we can use these different tactics, these different trainings, that we can implement more community policing, because ultimately, I want to feel like I can call the cops. I want to feel like I will be safe, like my community will be safe at the end of that interaction. I would like to know my police officers. I would like to be able to greet them by name. And I mean, in high school, the only police officers we knew were probation officers for, children who were involved in the justice system. I would like to know police officers on more positive circumstances. And honestly, like, we know that through these tactics, we can see through data, which we'll bring to you at a later time, Chair Nadolski, we can see through data just how much better the relationships between police and their communities are when these de-escalation trainings are put into force, when we have these community programs where members of the community can come out and meet police under positive circumstances where nobody is expecting anything bad to go down. And we need that. We need all of these things. We need our police officers to know who they're serving. We need our community to know who is serving them so that we can all feel safe, so that everyone can live their lives, so police officers can do their jobs. And I hope that we can work with you to get some of these things that we've been talking about, like a citizen review board, and like these de-escalation and bias trainings. And you know what? We don't know what it's like to be a police officer. Like Malik mentioned, we would love to be able to go through the Citizens Police Academy so that we can kind of come on the other side and see what it's like for officers in their everyday job. Because just like they don't know what it's like to be us, we don't know what it's like to be them. And we need to start fostering that understanding so that we can have a better and safer community. And Ogden is the perfect place to start with all of this, because I know that we can be the leader in police reform. I know that we can, be the example used in other city council meetings of what works and what creates a safer community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia.
Hi, my name's Brenda Kidman, and I am a part of the committee that was just formed. Use of force was defined as objectionably reasonable by the Supreme Court in 1989, Graham v. Connor. A lot of things have changed since 1989, and they're not going to go back. People are going to be paying attention. Departments that instill the importance of de-escalation, that are willing to acknowledge and learn from mistakes and strive to get everyone home, can prevent citizens from getting shot. It also lowers the number of deaths of officers on the job. Changing the police culture requires clear, strong policies and adequate training. Some deaths will always be inevitable, but they should be the exception rather than the rule. 40% of fatal cases do not involve a gun, but do involve mental illness. The number one rule of policing is to get home safe. The number two rule is you don't tell on your fellow officers. That's not a good rule. In Baltimore, training was overhauled, and the department saw excessive force complaints drop 36% in 2016. It dropped a further 42% in 2017, just because of training. The Police Executive Research Forum developed a training course called ICAT, Integrating Communications, Assessment, and Tactics. Okay, where are the dollars going to come from for this? Federal funds are available. Savings from court cases being filed by grieving families. Not having to pay police who are on administrative leave sitting on the couch. Not having to pay for their therapy because they took another person's life. And we'll have more officers still on the street. Ogden lost at least 28 officers to Salt Lake from 2015 to 2018 because recruits, just saying you can stay here if you have a tattoo or a beard, that's not going to cut it. You will reduce the number of officers leaving for more dollars if they stand a chance of going home at the end of the day. Everyone deserves their day in court, regardless of their crime. Are officers right now being trained to be peace officers or police enforcers? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Julia Aldrich, and I'm here again on behalf of the Marshall White Center. I wanted to respond when I was here last week. I wanted to respond to one of the statements that Mark Johnson had made about being able to use the Ben Lomond pool and working with the school on that. Our attendance and the people that we serve has dropped over 50% since going to Ben Lomond for a number of different reasons. Because Ben Lomond pool and the school district's pool, rightfully so, have a focus on academics and school swim teams. So we're limited as to the hours that we can use the pool, and those hours have moved up earlier in the morning. They're using those daytime hours for academics. So our hours have moved up earlier in the morning, and that's difficult for seniors. I know of a couple of examples of one woman who has a son who goes to Enable Industries. And because of the time that he is picked up later in the morning, she's unable to come to water aerobics because of that. So her water aerobics has dropped completely. Another one who is caring for an elderly parent in her home, and she cannot leave the house until the home health is there to cover for her, and she is unable to come. So those earlier hours have made it very difficult for some to come. Some of it is just the physical ability of being able to walk to the pool. There isn't parking available at the pool. We have an average age of late 70s, early 80s. Well, you're going to have a lot of handicapped people in that, and they're not physically able to walk to the pool from the parking lots that are available at Ben Lomond. And the parking lot and the Ben Lomond pool has exactly one handicap spot that's next to the door. So there isn't access. I know a lot of people who have driven around, looked for a parking place, and left because they couldn't find a parking place that they could walk to the pool to. So it isn't the school's district's fault, but it doesn't serve the purposes of the community. The other comment that I want to make is to Mayor Caldwell. When you were running for office, all of us talked to you, and I personally talked to you, and you made a commitment and a promise when you were running for office that you would protect and support the Marshall White Center. So I would like to see the evidence of that being carried through and following through on your campaign promises. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Terry Summers, and I have been a part of Ogden City for the past 35 years. I own a fourplex in Ogden City. I've owned it for 33 years. I've owned other properties in Ogden. I have rentals. So last week I came to the Board of Zoning and was denied a continued use permit. The month before I applied for a variance and I was denied it. The month before that I applied for a grandfathership, which I was denied. I have owned this fourplex for 33 years, and I was told this year that is not zoned correctly. I've been paying Ogden City my business license for the last 33 years, every single year. I do the Good Landlord program. I attend it every other year, and I complete that task. I have affordable housing, which is what I understand that you're here discussing is affordable housing. And so the Zoning Commission has demanded that I convert my fourplex, which is unconvertible, into a duplex. So I have contacted contractors to find out what that would run. And that's going to be anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 because my property is brick. They would have to bulldoze the whole thing, then rebuild it. I would have to get zoning permits and all sorts of stuff. I do not have that kind of money in my pocket to be able to convert my fourplex into a duplex and cut half of my tenants. My tenants are scared to death that I'm going to be made to kick them out. So the Zoning Commission said that I can keep all 4 tenants until somebody moves out, and then I cannot re-rent it until I've converted it. So I understand that this is happening to more than one person that owns property in Ogden City. The person that was in the zoning meeting before me last week had the same situation, and his property was on the 20th, on 20th Street and just above Quincy. And mine is on 3151 Quincy. So in the office in zoning, they have told me it's because the zoning department does not communicate with the licensing department, which does not communicate with the county. And so they are going after all the landowners that are not properly zoned in Ogden City, and they are demanding that they get their property into zoning. Now, I understand that if it's an older home and we've cut it up and put it into fourplex, but this was built as a fourplex in 1967. It is not a duplex. It never has been a duplex. It never can be a duplex unless it's rebuilt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paulo Santiago. I've been living in Ogden, Utah for 3 years. And I have seen the police get a bit violent with the people on the streets. I came from Arizona, and there's a law in Arizona. Every time the police officer takes his gun out of his holster, he has to write a report. Why was taken out? To see how many officers abuse of their power. And I think there'll be less killings because some officers go out on the street and they maybe didn't have a good day. They find someone like me with a beard and tattoos on their neck, and they talk to us rude and disrespect us. I think there should be a law. Every time the police officer takes his gun out, there should be a report done. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
My name is Edwin Stafford. Hopefully I don't run over. I came to address the council regarding the comments made last week. I've since thought better of that, and I would rather use my time to address the housing concerns. I'm on Section 8 housing myself. I'm up from Layton. That's where my voucher was activated, and I was given 60 days to get out of my lease and move down to Layton, so it's not by my decision. Half of my disability check just went to my rent. Because of a secret memorandum from Housing Director Ben Carson, indicating that I could pay 35% of my income instead of 30%. I'm at paying my rent where I was paying everything. In between the rest of my bills, I have about $50 a month left to live on. Plus or minus. I have a friend who is preparing to leave the state because services do not exist. He doesn't have the ability to wait for a good first step, and so he's out. I'm trying to figure out myself why that's a bad idea. I'm from Wyoming. We can't justify the expense for 5 people. But we've also had Uber Eats and buses to the food pantry and community activism since before Uber was ever a thing, because we know we don't have the infrastructure. I have met someone recently, I can't specify where, that is homeless because she was in the hospital when the rent check was due. And that was that. I don't know what to tell you guys, but help.
Hello, my name is Ruby Mercado, Giovanni's sister. I'll leave this sweet and short. I think this is a good time to be a role model for other cities. We want change for the better, not for the worse. And together as a community, I believe that we can avoid a situation like this from occurring again by establishing de-escalation training and racial profiling / racial diversity programs. Before another fatality like this becomes who Ogden is, and I believe that we are better than this. There are 15 states that have de-escalation training, and I think that we can be number 16. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ed Mackner. I've been here 2 or 3 weeks ago. I sent you all an email, and I did a little research on energy costs for 2,000 kilowatt hours. A kilowatt hour is our hours of work. Generally, the amount that would be paid for 1 month of pretty heavy air conditioning. I called Blanding and I asked them, well, what do you guys do? And the city of Blanding has its own energy entity. And I asked the city manager and he said $169. And then I looked at Rocky Mountain Power and it was $250, $249. I like HB 411, but I think we're sitting on a lot of potential for improving the opportunity for the poor and for our budget. We have a social association here. We have the water company, and there's no reason why Rocky Mountain Power should have such an advantage. Now, the reason Rocky Mountain Power has 411 is because they know that solar is much cheaper to generate than coal, and the coal industry is really having a hard time and so the idea here is this: every solar panel on a roof is a coal mine, and it's directly to the resource of the sun. I think we should start using the sun, but we should also use it for the benefit of the poor and the poor people, so if we can improve and lower the taxes, we'll be better off for it, all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bethany Lemke. I'm with the Coalition for Police Reform that was just created. I simply want to present the ideas of our Ogden police having to release body cam footage to the citizens within 10 days of any incidents that result in death of a citizen. We are still waiting on Giovanni's death's body cam footage, and that is something that I feel like is very necessary for the citizens to receive and to view. If Ogden City Police is to be trusted with all of the citizens, then I feel like that should be something that should be considered, them releasing body cam footage and working with the citizens. I've had experiences with the police, not myself being detained, but 2 children of color being detained with 6 cop cars lined up along the road as they're being sat down. And they ended up getting released as soon as their parents arrived. But 6 cop cars seemed pretty excessive to me. And when I walked up just to act as a witness for these children, they would not release their names and they wouldn't release their badge numbers. And I don't know if that's policy, but if that is a policy, I feel like that should be changed. As citizens or as servants of the public to protect and serve, I feel like it is necessary that they should present themselves in a professional manner and present their names and their badge numbers. And that should be a way to be held accountable by the citizens, because police should not be able to police themselves. They generally find themselves innocent, which is very obvious. So I feel like that is something that we do need to consider, and I hope that we can all work together to find some positive change so that our citizens do feel safe, and all of our citizens, including and especially our citizens of color, feel safe by those meant to protect and serve them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hi, Travis Pate. I just wanted to comment on a few other things in the reports from the administration with regards particularly Community Economic Development Department Citizen Participation Plan. We've had a great success, not only just as an individual, but as a neighborhood with the department. And they said, what do you guys want to see? And we're like, okay, we need more emphasis on the HUD foreclosures in and around parks and in and around schools. And they were very responsive to including that, and very responsive to bringing those to pass, because who wouldn't want to live by a park? Who wouldn't want to live by a school? And so the concentrations of those efforts, and so to actually have to adopt it as a plan, I think is just great, and have the council recognize it, that there is citizen participation. And as far as citizen participation also, I wanted to speak about the public hearing for the budget amendment, but I was like, just wait back. Can we mothball or shutter St. Anne's for a reasonable cost? Because there's already sewer, water, all these other infrastructures that are in that building. Clear the rest of the vacant property, and then just say, hey, we've got the money available to remove this building when the developer comes, but $200,000 when we spent over $50,000 for the Ogden Welcome Center, because as we know, UTA with Union Pacific and everything else had to put their front runner stop further and further away from public accesses. And so the Ogden Welcome Center, which was the train rehab, was well over $50,000 to get sewer and water to that little space. And so while we already have sewer and water and the possibility of a shelter in place aspect for public events, we're not going to have a Spike 150 event every year. But the amount of usage for that corridor was phenomenal. So with the Shoop Williams Candy Factory and all those other places that are available, it can be an alternate venue for event space. But I think we should shutter it, because even a gift from Nordstrom's Corporation, when Blake Nordstrom said, hey, we're closing our store, they donated the entire building to Ogden City. And it was right in the way of Kiesel Avenue, so it was probably the best part of the building, best part of the mall, because Nordstrom's brought their own architect and contractor and built their own building. It wasn't a monolith mega building, but it did need to go as far as the progress of the junction. $6 million investment, and now $186 million invested back into that same 20 acres. Phenomenal. But Nordstrom's was also used as the staging area for the Crown Plaza Hotel, which is now the Hampton Inn and Suites. All the loading docks, everything else, the vanities, the mirrors, everything came into Nordstrom's and was staged until they were ready to put it at the Hampton Inn. So besides a shelter-in-place thing for public events, I think also it could be a staging area, possibly when the developer comes. They said, hey, yeah, we could actually use that building as part of our incorporation. So I think that, to me, just the waste of just tearing it down, just to tear it down for part of it under the guise of land banking. Sewer and water and all the infrastructure is already there. So I'd say it'd be a lot more cost effective to mothball the building or shutter it. Thanks.
Thanks, Travis.
Good evening, Angel Castillo. I wanted to talk about the community survey report. There are a couple of things on that I think are very, very relevant. First and foremost, I sent the entire council a email today about 780 East 27th Street, which I also sent to Ben Nadolski, Chair, and Greg from Planning Department. We have an issue with our code enforcement, which was also brought up in the community plan. This particular house has been hit by a car. 2 of the 3 pillars that support an upstairs are missing, and the 3rd pillar has stress. The owner of the property is out of state and cannot be reached, and our hands are tied as a city with 15 days. We can't fine daily. We can't condemn the property. It is a public safety hazard, and if you look at that photo, you can tell that porch is going to collapse and someone's going to be injured gravely or die. And so we need to look into code enforcement and put some more teeth into code enforcement in emergency type situations like this. I'm not talking about a shutter falling off or a broken pane of glass or somebody's brown lawn. This is a true public safety hazard, and it needs to be addressed immediately. I am thrilled to death with the the results that we had gotten from the community survey. And I have been hammering you about affordable housing, inclusionary zoning, ADUs, and tiny homes for over a year now. And so I am absolutely thrilled that the community data supports that. And I'm even more excited the fact that the Housing Authority is telling you that we have a problem with affordable housing, middle income and low income, and that we have a homeless issue, and that affordable housing plays into that. Very few people choose to be homeless. They would like to pay rent to have a house. And so we can do our part as a city by following Salt Lake's lead and signing into law inclusionary zoning. This is what you can control. And I know that you're looking at that and the series that we're going to be having over the month. And I'm really hopeful that you'll see this. I feel like the ghost of Christmas past. Christmas future. I mean, I come from a city that has a housing crisis and a homeless crisis. And I have been beating you all about the head and the shoulders with housing affordability solutions because that's why I joined the Planning Commission. I don't want to see that happen here in Ogden. And this is the path that we're heading towards. And we have data to support this. So it's imperative that you act quickly so that we do not miss the opportunity to at least provide a pressure release valve for our working class. The median income for Ogden is $43,000. And for a first-year police officer, a teacher, a nurse, or a fireman, if you're renting a two-bedroom home, that puts you at 32% HUD rent burden via HUD. We have to start making choices that are going to allow middle-income and lower-income housing so that people can stay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. We normally like to take all of the questions that have been asked and provide answers immediately following. We're 40 minutes behind schedule for our next meeting, but we did not want that to keep us from hearing from you. But part of listening is also providing answers when asked. So I hope we can get together and get answers for a lot of the questions that were asked tonight. I think there were too many for us to be able to address right now. But I do hope we can get you the answers you're asking for. Some of them, I guess, we won't be able to answer in their entirety, but Malik, I gave you my card. I will make time to talk if you wish. Okay.
Discussed.
I missed it. Did you hear it?
No, I didn't. Oh.
Sorry, Malik, I didn't hear you.
So Mr. Johnson said he was going to look into this. I was wanting to see where the council was at.
Okay. Do we have any feedback on that particular request tonight?
I can speak from myself, and I know Mark's been in a lot of those meetings, and I'll just say I understand the emotion and sensitivity in the room. And we've met every day over these issues and some of the things that have been brought up in the last week. We'll meet again tomorrow. I know the chief has met with other council members about some of the concerns that have come up. All of this is recorded, and we will go through and look at the suggestions that have been made and promise to outreach with you all in terms of what we think we can do, what we think we can't do. We're looking at other communities and what's been effective and what hasn't been effective. But we do understand the emotion and appreciate you all being here and being involved in this. It's a difficult situation for everybody, and nobody wants to be in this on either the law enforcement or the family or the community side. If you listen to what we talked about earlier, we all share the same goals. And having a safe, inclusive community that's approachable where everybody feels like they're a part of something unique. And these comments and some of the concerns you've brought up help us to create that. So we'll look at all of them, and we'll be happy to get back to you as we're able to look at things. I will say for the chief, he's made 40 different policy and compensation changes in the 2.5 years he's been in that office. He's willing to take a harder look at things than any chief I've been around, and he's known statewide as being one of the most progressive police chiefs there is. So these comments don't occur in a vacuum. He will go and review and listen to every single comment that was made, and we'll get back. Sometimes things on the city level don't move as immediately as a lot of people would like to see, but that doesn't mean we're not committed to listening and being a part of the solutions.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we could just be kept apprised as well, if you don't mind. Yep.
Thank you. Okay. We got a lot of work to do. Comments from the mayor before we adjourn?
In the interest of time, we'll answer those questions and get back to you all, and we'll get on to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Comments from council members?
One very, very quick. I was one of those council members that was helping do a little bit of communication between Mercado's family and the police chief and the mayor. And I did have the opportunity to speak to Mr. Mercado, and I informed him that the chief actually offered to meet with him and speak with him. So I'm sure that offer is still there, Mr. Mercado, and that could be another avenue for you to get a lot of the answers that you're looking for. So just wanted to put that out there.
All right, thank you, Luis, for helping that way. We appreciate it. Any other council member comments?
As I was listening to the public comment, I thought, there's some good ideas here. There's some things that I think could be implemented and put to use to break down some of those barriers. And I know our chief is a good man. He's very proactive. Unless there's some reason that he can't, I suspect he will implement many of these things. So thank you for your input and the civility that's been here tonight. So thank you.
Any other comments from any other council members?
Sorry, I forgot one.
Sure.
Another quick comment. The lady that spoke about Marshall White left already, but I really appreciate that she came here and she was here last week. And I just wanted to add another reason why it is important to the reasons that she was talking about. I go swimming a lot at the Ben Lomond pool, and the cost, it's a little, for low-income families, is probably could be a little bit out of budget. It's $3 a person to get in. And, if you go 4 or 5 times a week with your family, that's pretty cost prohibitive. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Comments from any other council members? Okay, I think I had some similar thoughts you did. As we were hearing the feedback, there were some very constructive recommendations. Some things that seemed possible. So I hope that this venue often is really, really hard to have a real conversation, to really listen, to really be heard. So I hope we can make that opportunity available to you outside of this room. But I think you've made your point here tonight, and I hope you feel that it's been heard genuinely. Okay, if I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, and we'll get right to our next.
So moved.
Second.
We got a race. We have a motion by Councilmember Heyer, seconded by Councilmember Blair to adjourn. This is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. For those who have been waiting patiently, we'll get started on our Special Redevelopment Agency meeting.
Will you email me your list? Email me your list. I couldn't write fast enough. I'm sorry.
Mr. Blair.
All the things that you on your
Chair Nadolski, we could push the redevelopment agency meeting till after the housing,
Can we?
if you want to.
Yeah, that's good. I just couldn't write fast enough.
Thank you for
Yep. Yep.
Although it may not take very long either, it might take 10 minutes. Right.
What's the procedure for that, Denise?
No, we can just go to that work session. I was going to say that for a second. Come back.
We ought to have the list of those requests on.
Housing.
You want some, get a list of all the suggestions that the people put forward. Okay. Thanks.
Good job sticking it out.
Okay. Louise.
For sure.
It's okay. Okay, Tracy, you good? Okay. All right. Okay, good. Okay, welcome everybody to this. Oh, sorry.
Are we on the redevelopment agency?
Yeah.
Oh,
I know.
sorry.
We're gonna-
Okay, sorry. I was getting confused.
Before we get too much further, we'll just say that we think it's important that we get to the 7 p.m. fact-finding work session, and then we will get back to the RDA meeting immediately following. We have people here that are here specifically for the.
People here specifically for this man cell too.
Okay. Are you guys okay if we go with the?
I think we should.
Okay. There's no procedural requirement that we make any motions or anything, so we'd like to move through the fact-finding work session, then we'll get back to the RDA. Okay. Okay.
How long will the RDA take, I guess?
Yeah, we'll find out. Thanks, Bart. Welcome to the 7 p.m. fact-finding work session of September 3rd, 2019. The purpose of this work session is to conduct a fact-finding session regarding housing. The outline for the meeting is in the agenda, and I think we are starting with our own Mrs. Janine Eller-Smith.
Thank you. So I'm just going to do a really quick introduction. We have Glenn and Amy also helping with this for some additional information. So we're going to kind of go over the scope and some definitions, national trends, Utah trends, and then what you as the city council can and can control. And then you'll be able to hear from the city administration on the current Ogden policies and procedures that are in place. So I'm just going to start really quickly with 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why, and we'll eventually get to the how, but probably not during this 4-week discussion. So I'm going to start with the when and where because those are the easiest. So we have planned 4 different fact-finding work sessions starting tonight. And tonight, as I mentioned, what we're going to be covering. And then next week, we'll also be having the same fact-finding work discussion to review existing data. So we'll be hearing from Dr. Jennifer Nagy from Weber State on a report that she completed. Administrative staff will present a report from the Utah Foundation and also the city's own moderate income housing report. And also CED will present their analysis of impediment to fair housing, and that is a HUD requirement that they will be presenting to you. Then on the 24th, we're going to cover some options that you might want to consider as we're going through this. And then on October 1st, we're just going to kind of wrap up and have some longer discussions. So we've given you, because this is a 4-week, over 4 weeks, actually over 5 weeks presentation, we've given you a little notebook to take notes in. And so that when we get to the discussion part, then we can come back and have those discussions. We hope to have on October 1st to have most of the people that presented to answer any questions. So all of these work sessions will be here in the chambers at this building. So then the why. So mostly, we've talked about the economics realities. We've heard a lot, even just tonight, about the issues that are surrounding housing affordability. There was a recent change in state law that the legislature enacted. There's ongoing discussions at the state for even making some more changes. We've had questions and recommendations from residents. invitations to dialogue with city partners, and also just the population growth that we've had on the Wasatch Front. It just is a really relevant topic. And probably the most important one is that you as the council ask for this background information. I think some of you may have had some different ideas about what this might be. As we as staff tried to discuss the best way to present this, we realized that this is a ginormous issue. And so we thought that we'd try and provide some basic knowledge and information to kind of help you wrap your heads around how big this really is. Get to the what. There's really two whats. First, what we're going to cover, and I just reviewed that on the dates of what we're going to cover in these discussions. But the second, probably more important what, is what you as council members should be thinking about as we're having these discussions. What is the city's role in providing housing for the community? What are the goals? What can we do to meet those goals, and how we're going to measure those successes? We want to make it, so council staff's going to be making a presentation tonight. We're going to hear from administrative staff tonight, and next week we're also going to have a couple of local experts. We've asked Cameron Deal from the League of Cities and Towns to address you on the October 1st. So you're going to hear a lot of different kinds of information. What you're not going to hear is recommendations. We're not in the point where we're making any recommendations to you. This is all designed just for foundational information so that when we get to the end, you can say, hey, what about this, or what about this, or we'd like to change this, or we want to add this, whatever it is that you as the council feel might be appropriate once you've had this foundational information. So just briefly cover a couple of terms and definitions that you will often hear. And I just put this in here because for me, when I hear AMI, I'm like, what does that really mean? It stands for Area Median Income. And unfortunately or unfortunately, we are lumped into the Ogden-Clearfield metropolitan area. The area median income for our area is $78,100. And that means half of the households make more than that, half of the households make less than that. So what does that really translate to? So here's a little breakdown, and this is based on a HUD chart that I got from Kathy Fuentes. So 30% of AMI is about $25,000 a year. This is for a family of four. 50%, 42, and you can see those numbers. And I thought an interesting number at the top, if you want to be in the top 1% of Utah, you only have to make $375,000 a year. For the United States, it's $422,000. For the world, if you want to be in the top 1% of income in the world, you have to make $32,400. So I think that really shows how blessed we are to live here.
We'll get to questions at the end. That's okay.
So this just comes to income guidelines. I just kind of broke it down into hourly rates and weekly rates, so you can see what that really generates to. Basically, if you're making minimum wage or less, you're going to be in that 30% median income. The affordable housing, that term is really defined by HUD as 30% of your income goes to housing costs. So it's used to assess housing that's available to families earning less than area median income. So in other words, if you qualify for certain HUD programs, that's what they use. That number hasn't changed since the 1980s. It was a little bit arbitrary then. There's quite a bit of studies that saying it's really probably not an accurate number now, that probably that number should be different. But housing affordability is a term that the League has started to use. It really refers to obtainability, and it's a way to provide access to different houses of all incomes and make it available. And I think that Christy in the homelessness discussion really expressed how, or maybe it was Mackie that said, you know, what the pressure that goes on those lower income or lower cost housing units really puts pressure, you know, people from the higher levels are in those lower incomes, and that puts pressure on people down below so that they really can't afford anything or they're not available for them. And then affordability gap, that's basically just the difference between what you can afford and what it costs. And maybe we've all experienced that gap sometime in our experience. So those are just some really quick information. A lot of the information we hope you glean from these discussions you can use to inform your general housing policy discussions. We are going to be working on the HUD consolidated plan and renewing that for next year, so that will inform that. Any strategic plan projects, it can inform decisions for that, and also budgets. And FY21 budget, I had a little bit of panic attack because that seems so far away, but we are in FY20 right now, so it's really just next year's budget that we're talking about. So with that, I will turn the time over to Mr. Symes.
May I ask one question?
Yes, of course, please.
I'm just curious, Janine, I know on the HUD thing, it's the Ogden Clearfield measure for median income, but Ogden City's median income is considerably lower than that, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Make sure I'm thinking about things correct.
Looks like Glenn, you got a little head of Glenn on that one.
Yeah, so I do have that number in the
Great,
slides
you.
I'm going to present. So because we're running a little bit late, I'm going to go ahead and skip over the first couple of slides, even though I know you guys would love to hear about planning and all of, you know, land use patterns and things like that. The basic summary of those first couple of slides, and hopefully you get a chance to look over them, is basically how we plan our cities can have a really big impact on housing. So if you want to talk to me more about that, I'd be happy anytime to talk about some of those things. But like I said, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So as you saw with the first slide, I'm going to talk about some of the trends. And I was asked to talk about national housing trends and trends here in Utah. So we'll start with the national housing trends. So as you can imagine, obviously, when you look at trends, there are lots of numbers, lots of figures you can look at, lots of analysis that you can do. But what I thought I would start with, at least, is with 2007, 2008, with the housing crash and the Great Recession, which kind of changed the game for so much when it comes to housing. So in that 11-year period, as we all know, I think it's pretty common knowledge that housing prices have risen significantly. Some of the factors, the supply has fallen short. Demand obviously has increased. Rates have stayed relatively low. And incomes have risen, and unemployment is historically low right now. So these trends obviously are good for existing owners and sellers, not so good for new buyers or maybe people coming into a hotter market than they left. Then, of course, the low and moderate income folks are struggling the most with these housing prices. So when we look at some affordability numbers again, and there's lots of numbers out there. These are median home prices in 2018 dollars. When we look at the 1980 numbers, again adjusted for inflation, $147,000. The difference between the 80 and the 2000 number jumped up 21%, but in the 18 years after that, jumped up 40%. And then you can see the estimate for May of this year. That was a pretty significant jump on those numbers. As was mentioned earlier, regional differences are really important when it comes to the West Coast with cities like Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA. Those numbers are going to be significantly different than some of the other parts of the country. So you look at the Northeast and the Midwest, those are considerably lower than the West Coast. So when it comes to those prices and how much people are borrowing and how much housing costs are, rates are low, but they are starting to tick up a little bit. And when you get into those bigger numbers, even small changes in the rate can result in a big change in what your actual monthly payment might be for that. When we look at supply and demand issues, based on all the best research out there, this is both a supply and a demand issue. So higher costs and lower rates are making people stay in their homes longer, maybe remodel. And that's going to reduce some of the supply that might otherwise be out there. Some of the other things that you hear about a lot, some of the supply is limited to construction costs, labor shortages, land availability, and then sometimes slow approval processes. So those are some supply factors. Some demand factors, simply that there are more people looking for houses. Sometimes I think we think of millennials as always like 22-year-olds, but that's not the case. Last year, the millennials, that age group, age 23 to 38, you look at late 20s, early 30s, that's a pretty typical age to look at buying a home. So there are simply just more people looking for homes as those younger generations come of age. And then as wages go up, obviously that lets people afford more and puts a little bit more demand out there. So what some of the folks are seeing out there, prices are starting to level off, at least in some areas. But because of that high demand and low supply, that's really keeping these housing prices from falling. So they may start to level off, but they don't seem to be falling anywhere. So that's just a little bit on the national trends. When we get a little bit closer to home, we can take a look at some of the same numbers for the same time period. In the last 11 years, the state of Utah as a whole, there have been building permits issued, and the number's grown, but not that fast, particularly. So 2018 had the highest number since 2006, but that's the slowest rate in 70 years. So that largely has contributed to some of the supply shortage. This is an interesting chart that I wanted to include because it shows the mixture of housing. You see pre-recession, somewhere 75 to almost 80% of the building permits issued were for single-family homes. You look at last year, just a little over 50%. So it's quite a mix that we're getting now. And part of this is just due to the fact that single-family homes are so expensive. That's forcing people into other types of housing. So you see that one little anomaly there in 2014 where multifamily dwelling units, building permits issued actually surpassed those for single-family. So that's a pretty amazing statistic if you look back to the early 90s where it's closer to 90-10. I mean, you think that would be unheard of at that point. So when we look at some of the housing affordability numbers here in Utah and Weber County and Ogden City, the numbers between 2010 and 2019 see a 64% increase. Weber County, it's about the same. Ogden City is a little bit higher than that, 70% increase. And was mentioned earlier, and the number that we had just talked about, when it comes to household income, there's really a difference between Ogden and Utah. So you can see there that Ogden's median household income between 2009 and 2016 only went up $1,000 versus the state of Utah that went up $7,000. So when you have housing prices that are rising and incomes that are more or less flat, that's obviously going to exacerbate the affordability issue.
Glenn, could you explain why that might be? Why would Ogden have gone up more than another?
I don't know.
Okay, there is a supply and demand issue. I just didn't know if that was the supply or was the demand side.
Right, and I don't know personally. It sounds like there are answers behind me. So maybe we'll let some smarter folks than me explain that one.
Whispering happening.
I believe it's Ogden. Yeah, not the Ogden Clearfield Metro. So again, when we look at supply and demand for a good 40-year period, new housing units that were coming online outpaced new households that were being created. So we really didn't have a supply problem. More housing units were coming online than households, and so it was keeping up. From 2010 to 2017, though, there was a deficit in households or housing units coming online versus households of 40,000. So that means there were 40,000 new households created, or 40,000 housing units short per housing units or households that were created. Sorry, I jumbled that a little bit. But that was a pretty significant shortage. So 2018 finally saw the first surplus in which housing units were more than households created. But that shortage, that didn't take care of the backlog. That just was for that year. So
It's not cumulative.
yeah. And so that shortage has led to a lot of doubling up or having more than one generation in a household, or maybe even more than one family unit coming together. So that statistic said 11% of the population is doubling up. So that's pretty significant. So again, as surpluses come online, that might lead to some cooling off the prices, but not falling at all. So the one thing we haven't talked about are rental rates. And you can see from that report there that over the last 5 years, vacancy rates have stayed below 5%, which is pretty low. Some of the factors, again, obviously the housing shortage. There are some demographic shifts, so some people are preferring to rent, but a lot of it really is just the cost of ownership. And we've heard a little bit earlier today about rent burden. This report says that 20% of the renters, this is statewide, are paying more than 50% of their income for housing. And it sounded like that number might be a little bit higher for Ogden. So, and again, as we've heard, those folks are at a very high risk of homelessness when it's that kind of a burden. So more people are renting as homes become less affordable. And as we saw in the previous slide, home prices and rents have really just outpaced income in Ogden. Just a little bit of a reminder about where we expect to be 40 years from now. So our 2018 statewide population was just over 3 million. We expect about 5.5 million by 2060, 379 in Weber County, and then an addition of about 17,000 here in Ogden City. So some of the demographics, as our population ages, our average is going to be older. Our average age is going to be older. We are going to be more diverse and more urban, but we're still going to have more natural growth than net in-migration, and we're still going to stay as one of the fastest growing states in the nation. So what does all this mean? Some of the smartest folks out there have a couple of predictions, or at least thoughts about what might happen. So the 4 Wasatch Front counties, so Weber, Davis, Salt Lake, Utah County, plus Washington County down in St. George, will account for the vast majority of the growth. The land constraints are going to force development into the adjacent valleys. We see that already, obviously, with Tooele and Eagle Mountain. We see it up in the valley here, Summit County, Snyderville Basin. You see all those communities growing. And as was suggested with the building permits that were issued, we're trending towards smaller lots and multifamily units. This is, again, largely due to land availability and housing costs, and some with the shifting preferences. Our housing costs are still going to rise faster than the rest of the nation. And we are seeing that shift in land use patterns, as I mentioned before, to the higher density and some mixed use, transit-oriented development. And I think this last point is important as we're starting to see that change in land use pattern, is there's a perception change. So as you see new housing developments come online, the housing developments themselves will have a mixture of housing. So it's no longer one developer doing 50 acres of single family homes and then another developer doing, some townhomes or apartments over here. A lot of these new housing developments have all of those components right in there. And I think that really does help with the perception that other forms of housing are just as acceptable as single family homes. So I think that's an important point.
I think one of the barriers, Glenn, is that we have less land, open land.
Right, and that's one of the things I was going to touch on as far as the land use patterns with those first couple of slides. When we look at that near doubling of population, it's pretty easy to tell that we can't do the next 2 million people the same way we did the first 2 million people. We just don't have enough land to do that, to develop that same way. So we've got to do things differently. We just don't have land, and that is affecting, supply of land. So if you don't have any questions for me, I'll turn it over to Amy.
I do have a question about this future trends thing, where Ogden does have so much urban sprawl, for whatever it is. Is that likely to change over the next 50 years, or is it pretty well going to remain the same, do you think? Or?
Well, I think most of the land use pattern that's existing now will pretty much stay the same. It's the new development. There'll be, obviously, because we're built out, we're going to see a lot more infill development in a place like Ogden versus, a place like Eagle Mountain or Saratoga Springs, where it probably will just continue to sprawl.
I just didn't know if developers were going to see opportunities to go buy a block worth of single-family homes over a period of time and then build something multi-family.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it really would depend on land availability and how to make that pencil, because that's still a pretty big investment to buy existing houses. So the land prices would have
But if you can put 50 on something there was 10,
Right.
So I just wondered if that was something that has been foreseen at all.
Yeah, and they did the information that I looked at, they didn't anticipate that issue specifically, but there's certainly a possibility out there.
Okay.
So I have another quick question. So I always have a hard time distinguishing between the definitions, because we talk almost about two different things. One, we talk about renting, and then the other side we talk about affordable housing as in purchasing. And so like the strategic plan today, I heard more people wanting housing opportunities that are owner occupied type. And then we turn to this renter situation. In any of your research, is it distinguished anywhere between the two as far as future trends, and are we going more towards the renting and leasing type units versus the
So I mean, I haven't.
And then the second part of that is that what people want? I guess that's
Right.
the next second part.
Yeah, and I've come across some research in the planning research, not specifically for this presentation, that does suggest. I mean, there was kind of this belief out there that all millennials want to do is just rent and have this little tiny space, and so they can go and travel everywhere. I think that's a bit overstated. I think there is a portion of that population that still wants to do that, and I think that the percentage of that population probably is higher than some older generations. But I think younger people still really do want to own. I think there is, like I said, some preference for other maybe rental products, so they don't have to deal with some of the home ownership issues. But I have seen some articles lately that would suggest that maybe that was a little overstated for how many people want to rent. But I think the housing type might be where that balance is. So maybe it's an ownership product, so a townhome or a condo or something like that, so they can own it and build wealth and equity and things like that. But they don't have all the other cost burdens of dealing with a single family detached lot and yard care and everything else that comes with that. So I think there might be a balance there.
The other aspect is that prices of homes are increased so considerably,
right,
and the income has not kept pace with that, so they're forced into renting
Right.
more so than what they are. But
Yeah, and there was quite a bit of research that suggested that.
But I think we're seeing that maybe they are going to smaller units than what they had before.
Yeah, and that's what that data showed with the building permits. We're definitely going to a different kind of housing stock than just single-family detached housing. Okay, thanks.
Well, mine will be the shortest of the staffs. So, and this is very abbreviated, but the options before the city, what they can and cannot control related to housing. I know, there's some limitations. I'm sorry, Councilmember Jaburka. So one of the things that you can control is to expand or modify existing programs. We have a lot of programs right now in place to support different housing needs, to kind of help move some of the city's visions and missions forward. And so these are some of the programs that you could look at, maybe increasing funding for, reducing funding for, mixing that around a little bit, but adding programs, that's another option as well. Then you also have the city ordinances and policies and the land use determinations through the zoning. And so those are different options that you can also look at to say, okay, how exactly do we want to encourage housing in certain areas, density requirements, whether or not you have impact fees, who's paying for development costs and that. then budget and funding. So I referenced this earlier, but there are different ways. So if you wanted to increase the amount of funding you're spending on housing programs, even looking at maybe city-owned housing resources, using TIF, and there's also all the sources you already know about. So, and then in the research that we did, and Janine did a really great job giving us a lot of research to filter through with this, but one of the things was coordinated efforts. And so that's something that's come up before, and some of these are already currently underway, but working with different groups, working with maybe the Diversity Commission, having them provide some recommendations for you all when you're looking at housing and how that affects diverse populations, looking at coordinating with the county and their programs that they have right now, employers, seeing how you can encourage people to live in Ogden, or maybe employers can help provide some type of subsidies for people to live, like Ogden can, and local nonprofits. There's a lot of them here right now, the housing authorities, and then looking at developing a housing education program. So a lot of, to Glenn's presentation, people that can't access housing, part of it's an education thing. So there may be programs in place, but they don't know that they're in existence, know how to access them and navigate those. And so that's another option too. Or maybe they don't understand kind of some of the lingo associated with that. So these are some of the more limiting factors that you have before you that you can't really control. And so obviously it would be really great to be able to fund a lot of cool housing projects, but there are limited resources you have to account for, and other city priorities you have to fund as well. State law a lot of times restricts what we're able to do with different things, and so keeping that in mind and in check. And then job and housing market. So there's a lot the city can do to impact those things, but at the end of the day, there are some limitations with that, because there may be a national economic thing that happens, and that goes into the next one. And then really, to Glenn's point, with the growth, I think the growth is inevitable, and that's something we really can't control. So it's an external factor, market demand, so where people want to live, what types of homes they want to live in. We can't really always dictate and control that. And then how housing's working in other neighboring communities. So we have a lot of multifamily housing here, whereas some of the other areas in Weber County may not have that. And so kind of weighing that in and figuring out how to address housing needs with that. So with that, that is the extent of my portion. Any questions for me?
So, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I do have a question. So one of the things that I'm trying to figure this out through our process of how we could make a piece of land and have an affordable housing unit of some sort, whatever that is on there. How do we do that when we don't own the land? It's already been zoned something, the developers already, or the landowners already bought it for that zone. Can we, in the middle of all of this, say, oh no, it has to be I don't even know it, an R5 and not an R1? I mean,
well, and in the middle of it, there's some complexities
again,
there, because if you rezone and down zone, so to speak, a property to a certain extent, then it could be considered a taking. So if somebody has plans in place, but if you are working on a development agreement, then maybe you can dictate some of the things that happen there. But there are definitely some legal complexities with that. If it's something, and this is, in the research that we found, maybe the city does invest in some money to go and buy some property and actually kind of like we've been doing, but, do some type of development effort and look at some low income or affordable housing or whatever type of housing you feel needs to occur in the community. So, I mean, there's ways to make that happen, but there's also property rights that you have to balance that with. So it's not always super easy and straightforward.
And that's a topic we'll be covering in the third session.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to get us moving ahead here.
Yeah, that's okay. Any other questions on cans and can'ts?
Any more questions for Amy?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
Did a good job.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, I think Ward Ogden. Are you next, Ward? Yeah. Brandon, are you guys presenting after Ward? Okay.
Brandon just made me order pizza for him. I'm sorry.
Just for him?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, we'll
We're
share.
gonna dinner
We'll
earlier,
share.
but anybody
I'm
knows
just
that.
kidding.
Doesn't he know the rule?
I have a number of slides, and I'll try to go through them quickly. I'm trying to portray some of the history in terms of what the city has done in terms of investment in housing and neighborhood development over time. So you see kind of the context of how we got to where we are, and then what we've been able to do, and our fund sources, and programs, and what we were able to accomplish. So that's where we start. It basically comes down to housing people, friendships, institutions live in neighborhoods. And for one to be healthy, they all need to be healthy. And in our Quality Neighborhoods initiative, we talk a lot about what it takes to have healthy neighborhoods. And that's the context for the housing. That's the context for the people who have incomes, and for the institutions and friendships and all that live there. And I won't read them, but they're here on the overhead. But it has to do with demographics and housing and social and environmental conditions. And it takes I'll just go back to the housing ones really quickly. But in order for the neighborhoods to be healthy, we need a healthy mix of things, and we need our trends in terms of values and owner-renter ratios to be closer to the region. We're not close to the region. We're way off from the region.
We
In
have
terms
more
of owner,
owners than renters, or renters than owners?
we have a lot more renters than our renter-owner ratios are far more weighted to the renter side than the regional trend, and the value trends are lower as well. Income mix is lower in Ogden. And so a lot of the work that we're trying to do is to help the neighbors to be healthy, to bring up more of the balance into the equation. But not to say that lower income people should leave. That's not any part of the discussion. It's really a matter of just trying to make a healthy balance. So the philosophy is to build on the core strengths. We need to, and we've been working in the CBD and the East Central, because those are the core areas in Ogden. They're the heart of the community, the central core. Building on strengths and overcoming hurdles in the area provides physical and economic conditions and improves them for residents and owners. And it enhances the image, perception, and vitality of the entire community. So that's kind of why the central core has been focused on historically. And we've learned over time not to chase obstacles and specific issues. It's really healthy to stay focused on the objectives, the overall objectives. And I know that Greg Montgomery could talk a little bit more about the history of where we've gone with zoning and what was happening in the 50s, and how there was a press for more units, and issues were occurring in Ogden in the 50s, a lot of pressure for units. And what happened with zoning, and we had all of East Central as R5, and the disinvestment that took place in the neighborhoods going downhill over several decades. And it's been in my several years of working in Ogden, that's what I've been working on, is working back into those neighborhoods and bringing the health back into those neighborhoods. So focusing on one issue or on one challenge or on thinking about one aspect it's kind of, there's things that we want to focus on, but anyway, one of the things we've learned is to try and stay focused on the big picture and what it takes to have a healthy community. So in terms of targeting, how we focus the money, it's gone through an evolution. In the 70s, in 1976, we received the Community Development Block Grant. And the way that was spent was basically driven by whatever guidelines there were in the program. And so who's eligible? That's really where the targeting was. Later in the 80s, we started thinking, well, where should we target that? Maybe there's a geographic targeting. Whose turn is it to receive funds? Where's the greatest need? Where should we bring the programs? And then later, we kind of evolved to to understanding that coordinating our efforts into action plans really and focusing on objectives is creates a bigger and better benefit to the community. It's a higher way of targeting. So it evolved from administering programs and projects to benefit recipients to using those programs and projects and partnerships as a tool to benefit recipients and to revitalize neighborhoods. And targeting synergizes the efforts, focusing the effort. Just kind of a sort of a graphic that shows that, you know, a shotgun approach can have an individual benefit and a relatively smaller community benefit, whereas targeting the individual benefits the same because people are still receiving the benefit, but with the coordinated effort, then you can achieve things such as a perception change that we're finding in some of the neighborhoods. We're working in snowball effect where people are willing to do their own investment and synergies with other partners. Synergizing maximizes the impact by focusing on areas of need with the greatest capacity to respond. Jefferson Avenue Historic District is one of those examples where 20 years ago, there were most of the homes were rental homes, and a handful, maybe 4 or 5 owner-occupied homes in a 2-block area. But there were good bones, good houses, good structures, historic, and a lot of history in that neighborhood. So we were able to do a lot of work there, and that neighborhood has since become one of our iconic neighborhoods. So synergizing obviously maximizes the effort and the community benefits accrue. Just quickly, some of the things that we've been doing in terms of strategies on targeting are the comprehensive housing affordability strategy of the 80s. In the 1980s, we established an Ogden target area. In the mid 90s, the HUD rules changed and we started doing consolidated planning, which was an upgrade to the comprehensive affordability strategy. The neighborhood revitalization strategy takes the con plan and chooses a neighborhood within the overall community and says, let's focus here because we can see more benefits when we focus. And then HUD also gives us some flexibility in terms of how the funds are used and things are counted. So we get some incentives to focus. In the mid 95 to 2005, we had an enterprise community grant, which had an area and it dealt with neighborhood interactions and partnerships in neighborhoods. The state gave us a unit reduction grant in 2015. Our local policies, things such as when I started working for Ogden City in 1983, we had an 8-block area that was known as the Rainbow Neighborhood, and it was where the D School is. And so it's kind of interesting to participate in the start of this thing, and then eventually the D School goes away, and we now have something else happening there, which is kind of fun to see. Then we started targeting a little more tightly, and some other things that the city does, such as redevelopment areas and adopting the East Central Revitalization Strategy in 2004, which sort of evolved into the neighborhood Quality Neighborhood Initiative, with a lot more teeth to it and a lot more programmatic elements. Just quickly, some of the target areas that we've got: the Owen and Ogden target area, which is citywide; the consolidated plan target area, which basically shows where the concentrations of low and moderate income households live. It's basically west of Harrison, for the most part, in Ogden. The neighborhood revitalization strategy area, again, west, it's kind of the east central and the downtown area. And again, our Quality Neighborhood Initiative, where we're focusing largely on the east central, but also really honing in on the areas of opportunity and the areas that need kind of the impediments to development and vitality in that neighborhood. So that's this is where we're currently focusing. Block level action plans really is where it drills down, and what we've been able to accomplish there is some of the best and the most notable effects that we've been able to have with the programming have been in places like Jefferson Avenue, where we replaced the infrastructure. We did 25 new housing units and restored 11 homes back to single family. In the Eccles Avenue Historic District with the new infrastructure, a new home, 2 homes renovated and sold, and 6 apartments restored, and good partnership with the neighborhood in that historic district. 2500 Quincy is in the corridor between Eccles Avenue and the Jefferson Avenue Historic Districts, and so it's kind of helping to fill in the gap between there. And this was kind of a bombed out neighborhood. We were able to get involved with HUD homes and some other homes. 7 homes renovated and sold, 5 new homes, sidewalks and street trees, and the neighborhood is completely turned around. Same with the Fowler Avenue, 25th and Fowler, 3 new homes, 2 new homes, 3 homes renovated, and new sidewalks. And then we did the affordable homes on 27th and Lincoln, 21 new homes and some public improvements there as well. Just recently, we've been just completed working on 27th and Gramercy, which is a great little neighborhood with 4 new homes and 4 renovations and sidewalks and street trees, and it's just really nice, quaint. The home that you're seeing there, one of those homes was on the news as being a meth-contaminated home that was under demolition, and the 3 news stations came up and watched us tear it down. It was a slow news day, but they like to see things get torn down. The block level strategies, again, in the D school area, this is kind of one of our shining examples of a turnaround from the D school to new housing and taking advantage of purchase and resale opportunities. These 3 homes on the bottom are just west of the Newbridge School, and just closing on the house on the right here next week. So 29 new homes there. 7 homes are already renovated and sold, and new sidewalk and trees. And this, of course, is the before and after of the educational element in that neighborhood, where we were able to close the street, expand and rebuild Liberty Park, incorporate that in with the Newbridge School, and take down the old D school and do some housing there. So talk briefly about what our investments are. We have the Community Development Block Grant. As I mentioned, 1976, we got the grant. It's an entitlement grant. We get it every year as long as we make an application and go through the consolidated planning process. Its objectives are to benefit low and moderate income households and to alleviate slum and blight. And it's used in Ogden for housing, public improvements, and business loans. And we've chosen to invest in physical improvements which arrest and reverse the decades of decline in economic development activities to create jobs and enhance our tax base. Our current budget is just over $1 million. That's our current entitlement grant. This is an interesting graph which shows the history. We did, of course, get the grant in 1976, but we were tracking this one just based on since 1989 through 2020, what our grant amounts have been, how they've gone up and down, and we're hovering now around $1 million a year. But when you take into account inflation, we're now able to purchase only about a quarter of what we could buy in the year 1989 with basically the same dollar. We can only buy $237,000 in value. So leveraging is a very important thing. Also understanding the demands on the money, just where it's going and what we can get now. What we used to do, we did a bunch of housing loans, and then we did a big public improvement project every year or two. We rebuilt streets and did a lot of public work back in those days. We can no longer do that. We just don't have the money, the buying power anyway. The home grant is another entitlement grant that we get every year. It's geared only towards low and moderate income housing. And we get just over $400,000 each year. And here's the buying power graph and the grant amounts. It started at $500,000, went up a little bit, and then it's now around $400,000, so it does fluctuate. But our buying power on that's less than half now. We have the Quality Neighborhood Set Aside, where the council was awarded $1 million a year for the past 5 years, and we're in the final year of that. We're using it for property acquisition, demolition, housing rehab, and land development for future housing. We have a loan from the Synchrony Bank in the $1.4 million loan. It's a 2-year loan. We get a very good interest rate, and we repay that loan when we resell the properties that it's invested in. We use it for property acquisition, demolition, new housing, and renovation of housing. And the tools that these funds are used are focused through are, well, this is the council's tool, which is the Neighbor Up grant, the $1,000 grant that's available for block parties and picnics and gatherings and various things like that. And we have our Home Buyer Assistance Program, which is a $5,000 loan. Officers, teachers, and firefighters can get up to $10,000. No monthly payments, due on sale. It's a great program, very popular, and has been in place since 1988. Our budget this year is $250,000. Since '88, we've done 1,836 projects and invested $5.8 million. There's just kind of a scattered map of where those loans have taken place. Those people have bought homes in these areas. Emergency home repair loans, loans up to $5,000, due on sale. And this is for very low income people who have problems. It's generally for replacing furnaces, sewer lines, electrical work, and that kind of thing. Our budget each year is about $40,000. We used to do owner rehab loans with the federal funds, the block grant. That program has since been replaced with the HELP program, but over the time frame from 1976 to 2006, we did 423 projects and invested $5.8 million. And there's kind of a representation of where those loans were done. The HELP loan is the new loan, very popular and very helpful to people. It doesn't have income limits. It's not federally assisted, and it doesn't come with all the federal strings, which basically is what killed the owner loan that ended a few years ago. Average loan's about $15,000, and we have in the budget this year $360,000, and that's spent every year. And that's a good recycling program that comes back to us. We've done 157 projects so far and $1.7 million. There's a representation of the kinds of things that gets done. But we also do lots of roofs, lots of sewer lines, a lot of code work inside, like electrical and plumbing and some substantive improvements to homes. There's some kind of representation of where the loans have been done. Our purchase, rehab, and resell, the Home Sweet Ogden program, we buy homes in significant need of repair. Over the course of the past several years, we've got a lot of HUD homes. They're renovated and sold, and moderate income households have purchased these homes. We have about a $1.5 million budget this year. Since '91, we've done 213 projects. The amount of discount that HUD has given us equals $4.6 million. That's the discounts in the sales price that we purchased those homes from HUD. So that was a very helpful grant. To us, we've invested $20 million in that program, and there's where those homes were done. The unit reduction program is very helpful in restoring homes that were converted to multi-units to restore them back to single family. It involved the $20,000 per unit grant. It turns into a grant when the project's completed. The city council had funded a number of years, and then the state funded some of the last years of that, and the money's gone. So we need to get more money to put into that program. There's still lots of areas, lots of homes in the area that could be done. Here's an example of some of the things that have been done. A home on 24th and Quincy just recently completed. Here's where the projects were done. Volunteer partnership grants up to $1,000 for material and equipment for exterior improvements, and these projects are undertaken by volunteer groups. And we've also coordinated a number of times with large-scale projects with multiple units. Washington Heights Church, for instance, has done up to 24 homes in a 2-week period of time. And we have a $70,000 budget for that. Here's an example. These are Washington Heights people doing a project. We've done 278 projects in just a 3-year period of time with 4,800 volunteers. It's very successful. A lot of great people in the community giving their time. And there's where the projects are all located. Single-family infill housing can occur on scattered lots or in infill subdivisions. And it's available to mostly to moderate and low-income households, but there are some that are sold above the moderate income range. We currently have $1.3 million in Quality Neighborhoods funds and $250,000 in block grant. And since '93, we've done 160 projects, 95 in 4 subdivisions and 65 scattered sites with a $23 million total investment. And here's where they are located. Multifamily, the city has not built multifamily properties, but we have in fact assisted others in doing that, private sector, and helped the Housing Authority with some projects as well. Obviously the tax increment funds are available and have been used. And low-income housing tax credits are a common equity funding source that we're using here in Ogden. And then one of our final notes here in terms of tools is our infrastructure improvements. Since 1976 to the present, we've done 82 projects and spent $4.4 million. And we used to do a lot more, as I mentioned, but the fund's buying power has gone down. We have $250,000 in the budget. So what have we achieved? Just kind of where the history is. We've achieved quality, affordable housing for recipients. And as Janine mentioned earlier, what the definition of a low and moderate income household is 80% of the area median. So $78,000 being the median income, $68,000 is the what's determined to be moderate income, and so below that is low and moderate income, which equals about $32 an hour. For example, the affordability of our projects has been in Lincoln Cottages. Those were affordable to households at 43% of the median income, which is about $15 an hour. The bungalow project, 24th Street, was affordable at 73% of median, which is about $56,000. Our average scattered site infill project is affordable at 60% of median. So these are relatively affordable homes.
Ward, I think
yes.
that hourly rate, that's a combined rate for the total house, right?
Yeah.
So if it's more than one people are working, like,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. A whole household or a couple, say a married couple, could have a combined income of $25 an hour and afford one of those homes.
Is that based on the Ogden Clearfield
Yes, the
metro
MSA.
area? But we just talked about that the Ogden area is considerably lower than the.
Well, the incomes in Ogden are lower, sure, but the hourly rate is still takes $53,000 to buy the home. So. And so the number from the AMI, obviously the 60% of AMI is based on the statistical area, which is Ogden Clearfield. The rehab and resale projects on average have been affordable to 50% of the median, which is actually determined to be low income. And that is about a $20 an hour wage. So of the 373 homes that we've built and sold or remodeled and sold, 335 have been bought by low and moderate income home buyers, which is about 90%. So most of what we've done has been on that.
More quick question.
Yes.
So of these numbers you have here, it's late. I hope I can put my question out. What's the percentage of income that people would be following these numbers? So earlier in one of the other presentations we were talking about, people need to be at 30% of their salary to be going towards their mortgage. That should be the max.
Mm-hmm.
How do those apply to these numbers you have here?
That's how it's calculated. It's 30% of that wage. would
Okay.
be, if you had that wage and you spent 30%, then you can buy that home.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think what we heard earlier is that if the median household income in Ogden is actually 42,000,
yeah,
then that 30% is even less. So we would be providing affordable housing by Ogden standards to far fewer than the 90%. Is that?
Well, if when you look at the statistical area, you're really only looking at the central column. It still takes $20 an hour. So that's a different percentage of median for Ogden versus the MSA, but it's still $20 an hour. So you can still get the home. Now that number would be a bigger number. It'd be higher than 50% of Ogden's median income, but you still could buy the home with $42,000 income.
So are we required to use that Ogden Clearfield number by the federal guidelines, or is there?
Yes, we are when it comes to using the HUD funds. But in reality, this is really just to portray kind of a relative affordability, It's just to say most of what we've been doing is available and affordable to people who have moderate incomes. So really that's what we're trying to say.
In the Ogden Weaver, or in the Ogden Clearfield
Sure.
statistical area.
And I guess if we were to take Ogden, we could say what percent of median it would be from Ogden's wage as well. Sure. But people come and buy these homes who have moderate incomes. So that's really the bottom line. So quality affordable housing for the recipients, and then of course healthy neighborhoods, characteristics we talked about before, and the shift in the image. I'll just go through the final few slides, which really are just before and after, which show the effect that we're having in doing the investment in these neighborhoods. A before and after of a home on Quincy Avenue that was sold to a moderate income household. Here's one of the Jefferson Avenue homes that was an example of a unit reduction, 14 units in that place that had a really interesting history. Could spend all night talking about what happened in that place. But now it's been renovated and it's part of the iconic neighborhood again. A home, the before shot here was a HUD home that had a failed structure. The foundation had failed and had to be taken down. So a new scattered site infill home, that's an example of one of those. The bungalow project on 24th Street, the commercial building had used up its useful life and needed to be demolished. There was a big vacant lot next door. So the combination of that site with the vacant lot is where those 23 new bungalows went. And again, talking about image shift, this is the corner of 22nd and Adams Avenue, the corner where the D school used to be, and this was the little house on the corner. So this is the kind of the status of where we're at, the programs that we've got in place, the level of funding that we've got in place, kind of how we got to where we are, and of course we can go from there. But my take on this over my history is that block level planning and focusing resources on a block level has a tremendous impact on the community, and those are the areas where not only the residents there, but others that live in Ogden or come to Ogden, they can tell that Ogden's improving because of the investment that the city is going through. So, any other questions?
Any other questions forward?
I just want to say thanks to Ward for putting this all together. I know we hear about these things kind of in separate meetings at different times, and I really appreciate you kind of consolidating it so we can the bigger picture all at once.
Thank you. Is that it?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think Greg?
No, we're done.
Oh. Are you sure, Greg? Because he looks really pumped.
Okay.
I thought. Okay.
I'll get him.
You can play Brandon for that one. Okay. For what it's worth, you scared the heck out of Greg. Or I did. Okay.
I guess that wraps up our
I just want to take public comment.
housing fact-finding session tonight. That was a lot of info. If anybody has feedback to give to the council, we'd encourage it. I think that kind of sets the tone for what the problem is, some of the tools that we have available, but more info to come.
So in the upcoming, since I already jumped ahead, are we going to talk about the stock at all, or are we going to talk about what we've got? And the only reason I'm asking that is because I look at we're in a deficit of 2,500 below 30% affordable housing units. If we did something like an inclusionary zone where it's at 10%, that means we have to build 25,000 apartments here in Ogden in order to fix that problem. And are we going to talk about the supply?
That's what you want to talk about. We can.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know if that's. Was that coming at all? I just didn't. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around some of the issues of how to even. I mean, if we put 5 up, is that going to really make a difference? I guess is my question.
I totally hear you, and I mean, we do have to, acknowledge that this is all Weber County, so I totally hear what you're saying.
But then listening tonight, it sounds like it's a lot in Ogden.
It's mostly here.
I guess I'm trying to.
That's the goal of this, is to wrap our minds around it. But if you need specific information to help you wrap your mind around it,
I just started thinking, okay, inclusionary zones, great. Let's, let it in RDA areas where we have tax increment, we require them to do 10%. Holy cow, there's no way that we can build 25,000 units in Ogden. Yeah. So I guess maybe we can.
Well, and I think
in my lifetime.
There's a couple of other reports that I think will speak to this issue a little bit, and
and that's what maybe you guys, I guess, have been more intimate in it. So I guess
I'm asking the question. I don't know if we're going to get one big chart that just tells us everything we need to know. That would be awesome. I mean,
I want the one big chart. That's kind of what I was asking for earlier. Is that
maybe there isn't one.
We have some kind of a pie chart. This is how much of each we have, and this divides the substandard with the.
Well, it is
livable
kind of
housing
laid out. It's laid out a little bit in some of these charts. I think the challenge is that we all need to understand, like this discussion around Ogden Clearfield area AMI versus Ogden City incomes in each of those areas, because sometimes you look at one chart, it'll be talking about the whole region or something. Another chart will be talking about Weber County, and those are some things that get a little bit complicated.
Well, I think the thing that's going to help me is if I understand the Ogden City versus the Weber County status, it's going to, Commissioner Jenkins is really hot on this idea with the other communities in the county, and I've had several of them talk to me about what they're doing. They're changing their mindset, but I don't know how to talk to them yet.
Right.
And so I'm wanting to learn the language that's going to help me to communicate countywide. This is what we need to have a healthy county, because we can't carry it all.
That's what I'm asking it. So, if we need, even if it's, I don't know, let's say we need 12,000 units. Where are we going to put those? What do they look like? Is that an ADU? Can we fix it with tiny homes? That's kind of where I would like this to go. I don't know if we can get to that. I mean, even if it's 20%, we still have to build 12,000 units. And where are we going to build those?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just asking. Then those are the kind of questions. We have the numbers of what we're in deficit right now. We know what our population is going to be in 2030. We know how many people are going to buy homes. How do we get there? I guess is where. So that's what I would like to see. Maybe not by our fourth session, but maybe kind of trying to figure that out. Yeah. Because to me, that's what success is how do we get there, not what's happening now.
I think we need to know what not to do. That's kind of as important to me as anything else. The old adage that came up earlier: if you keep on doing the same old thing you've always done, you're always going to get what you've always gotten.
And it looks like board's moving that needle.
Yeah. Well, and I want to speak to definitely this issue around, something that I've observed in my short time here working on community issues is that we have a revolving door of this low income housing that's very substandard. So if one of the issues is that our income is only increased by $1,000 or whatever it was in the report versus the whole state being 7,000. Part of that issue is that when people are economically able, they move out of Ogden. I mean, in my short time, that's just an observation I have. So then other people move back into that substandard housing, and it's just going to continue being that way if we don't address it in some way and have some other spaces for people to live that would make them want to stay. Right.
Which is a whole other conversation about wages and economic development and opportunity here. And so
all those kinds of things.
I guess I think we need some goals at the end of our fourth session of what do we need to do. And maybe
So
I think the agenda that I saw is great. And I just
here's the challenge we had. We know we have a challenge. We're not the only city dealing with it. I mean, it's not like there's a city out there with the silver bullet here, right?
Yeah. Well, a couple, 100
Yeah.
in San Juan County.
But they're not gonna.
San Juan County. Well, more on that later. But we're trying to wrap our minds around it because it's so big and so complex. Hence the proposal that we put forward. But if that changes, it's you think you might know what might help answer the questions. But if we get through this and we don't have what we need, let us know what you need, and let's put it in the pipeline for this because this is really big and complicated. And if we do something or don't do something, we need to know why. Right?
Yeah. And I think it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. It's not like, just continue doing what we're doing now is the answer. Maybe we continue doing that and we do this other thing and we do this other thing also. Because there's got to be many different tools that we I was at this Housing Coalition Summit, right? And they're like talking about Moab and their issues down there and how they're trying to deal with it. And it's like you throw a bunch of things at the wall a little bit to see what is actually going to make impact. And it's going to take a little time to actually see how those things work.
I love that we're having the conversation. I think something needs to be done. And if, I think we're doing a lot. We just need to figure out if we can do more. And
it's not going to be a straightforward answer at the end of this. I can tell you that. There's a reason this is hard for every city, right?
Right.
So,
well, we can refine what we're doing.
I hope so.
And that's the whole point, I think, is to refine what we're doing.
And I love the idea of working with the county in partnership to figure it out.
Well, we've been carrying pretty well the whole county's load for a while, and the time that, they're recognizing that too. They're recognizing that there's a little pressure on them to increase their.
We've got
and
one
they
more
are.
meeting.
I think they're recognizing it and they're stepping up. And I think we just, again, I think there's some success metrics that we can look at. And it's, how many have we done and are we getting to a goal and moving forward?
Yeah.
We still have one more meeting tonight.
Let's have it.
Let's have it, shall we?
Yep.
Okay.
So thank you, staff. And
Yeah.
guys.
Thank you everybody for attending. If you have the magic answer, please let us know.
Yeah, no kidding.
You don't have to leave. We have one more meeting.
We have one more meeting. It's really
A
fun.
lot of fun left.
See, that's why we move forward.
Oh, there he is.
Yep. One more. We got one more meeting.
We got one more meeting.
Hang on. Sorry. There you go.
We can do this in 10 minutes.
If nobody asks any questions.
Erwin.
No, I'm maybe not even
Just hang tight. We got
that much. But
a little more to do.
this has to be going.
Okay. Tracy, you good? Okay, guys, let's do this.
Can we do it standing up?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Welcome to the Special Redevelopment Agency meeting, please. Guys, we're starting a meeting.
Let's do it.
Can I do it semi-am?
Yeah, but we had a meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
We got it.
Still here.
Welcome to the Special Redevelopment Agency meeting of September 3rd, 2019. Let the roll call reflect that all board members are present. First item on our agenda is public hearing, acquisition of St. Anne's Center and Western Ice House properties. Can we take our conversation out in the lobby? Thanks.
We're having a meeting.
We got more business, sorry. We'll be receiving a presentation from Brandon Cooper on all of the items listed under 2A1,
2 and 3 and AP. If I got that right.
Same one.
So we'll hear everything in one presentation, and then we'll take action individually. That's what I was
Great,
trying
thank
to say.
you. And I will pull Lisa Stout in to cover some of the budget amendment numbers. You've seen those a number of times before. So tonight's discussion regarding the 4 resolutions is in relation to the purchase of the former St. Anne's property. That is adjacent to the Union Station campus, and we have some interest in purchasing or developing the Union Station campus over time, and the land to the south of the existing campus is important in terms of that future development. Here are the 7 parcels in consideration. That's just south of Binford. You'll see under the map there that the old St. Anne's building covers about 3 of those parcels, and then the others are vacant land essentially. There's a picture for you to be familiar with the site. If you're not, there's lots of reasons why this acquisition is important. Again, most of that is related to the development of the Union Station campus, which is a forthcoming process. We've yet to define what that actually looks like per se, but we do know that land in and around the area is important to the overall development. There's a number of considerations, as you've noticed. There's a couple of real estate purchase contracts that are related to the property, the actual property transaction. There's a budget amendment. There already has been council action on the budget amendment and the conveyance of property necessary for the loan. This is the Western Ice House property transaction details. $32,000 for a little tiny parcel, 0.08 acres. Again, this is contiguous to some of the parcels that the city already owns, so that makes for a nice contiguous assemblage there. The St. Anne's Center, which includes the existing building, those 6 parcels, a little under a full acre, $775,000 for those. And then this is the loan that is necessary to make those transactions, $729,000 with 119 monthly payments of $5,017 with a balloon of $467,142.70. And I'll let Lisa get into that for just a moment. As noted in the council meeting, there are 2 parcels of land that are necessary to be pledged as collateral. Those were conveyed to the RDA as of this evening, and so we will use those as collateral to secure this loan. Again, there are those 2 parcels. And here's how the budget is affected, so I'll let Lisa describe this.
Brandon, can you go back to your other slide? I don't know if the dates on that is correct.
This one here?
We made the starting payment of $5,000.
Thank you. Yes, this is an older slide deck. I failed to make that change. So that payment would be in September.
Brandon,
Okay.
I think
Thank you.
Vice Chair Berger has a question for you too.
Well, and I'm actually just building on that. So I know that one of our premises is that, this loan will be overtaken hopefully by someone else that will develop the property. So do you foresee that they would pay back on some of this money that we're paying monthly, or just the amount that would be left?
They would most likely just take out the remaining balance of the note. We haven't structured any deals yet, so we don't know. But
curious.
that's just a hunch.
I hadn't thought of asking that
Yeah,
before.
given some of the gap that we would likely have to overcome in terms of the development cost. Good question.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. The budget opening portion of this transaction includes the items listed in fiscal year 2020 for the purchase of St. Anne's Western Ice House. To cover the loan fees and the closing costs, the total budget opening in the redevelopment agency is $1,074,325. That is the proposal, the resolution before you for consideration tonight. The other amounts listed in fiscal year 21 through fiscal year 2030 was just a pro forma to show you the possible requirements for debt service.
You don't have to lie. You don't really appreciate being here at this late of hour.
I'm a night owl, so
Oh, okay.
Are you
I'd rather be here late than early.
We don't pay enough, but it makes you feel any
Exactly.
better. We make a lot less.
But thank you. We appreciate you being here. Maybe
Thank
that's
you.
a better way to say it.
They get dinner, though. Okay, so tonight is the night for action. So we request approval of the budget amendment for the RDA action to enter into a loan document with Golden West Credit Union, and then the subsequent action to buy St. Anne's and buy the Western Ice House property. So those are the actions tonight, resolutions 10, 11, 12, and 13. If you so choose, then we would move forward with closing the Golden West loan. That would be in the next day or so. Once we can route and get those documents reviewed and approved, then we would close the real estate transaction on both the St. Anne's and the Western Ice House. That would be a separate transaction. We would move to abate any asbestos in the facility at the St. Anne's Center, and then we would open up a public solicitation for bids for demolition. Once the building's demolished, we would grade and grass the area because we don't have immediate plans for development. We do want that to look nice. So in this case, we have included in the budget some money to actually put some turf down instead of just mowing weeds. And then those parcels would then be included in our Union Station planning efforts, which is starting tomorrow for those of you who are joining us. And then those future plans would be incorporated and presented for final approval. Lots of public outreach, and so that's all forthcoming. The reason I'd like to just address the question of why demo the building, why demo it versus keep it. That's always something that we look at judiciously on every property. There's some cases where we keep buildings vacant and board it up. There's other areas where we don't want to do that. This is one of those cases. There is a cost in maintaining a vacant building. The mitigation of the transient vandalism and trespassing is a significant concern. And so most of the time we elect to remove these buildings. In the case of St. Anne's, where there is zero chance that it would be incorporated into any future development plans, and the fact that it could potentially be used for another type of a venue, those are just things, in terms of a cost-benefit analysis, those are just things that don't have a lot of weight. The building doesn't have an occupancy permit right now, and so it couldn't be used on any substantial basis in terms of getting a temporary tenant in there. There wouldn't be necessary upgrades to have a temporary occupancy of any kind, and those are just dollars that we don't want to spend. So we'd like to see it torn down. We can make it a nice area that we could maintain easily. Mowing grass would just get rotated into our other city lots. And so it's something easy. And then once development happens, there are no impediments to that development to take care of at that time. Everything is solved now, and it allows us to move on. So those are the next steps, and I'll answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions for Mr. Cooper? Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Brandon. That puts us to public comment. If you wish to address the council on these items and this proposal as a whole, now is your chance to do so. Travis, I think you know the routine.
Travis Pate, I just echo the comments earlier. I know there was an attempt to resolve, but I think a temporary tenant, which is revenue generating versus just no revenue coming from the property, especially when we have a $5,000 a month payment. You could even just say, hey, you can rent all this property for $5,000 a month, and then you make your payment, and then we're at a month to month. So if we do get a contractor, here's your notice to vacate. And as far as updates to the property, we made Lindquist Field earn through tax sales and revenues to pay for lighting, and yet at the Solomon Center for the gym space only, we gifted $500,000 to EOS without even comparing, did Roy have to do a tenant agreement upgrade? And I know mock for the individual staff members that worked on it, but if it was important, then EOS should have been at that last meeting, as well as the person that actually negotiated the deal, instead of it just being hearsay, because it wouldn't have stood up in court for that aspect. And so I think that a lot of times when we just throw money here and there, it really does make a difference. $5,000 a month that we're paying for when we could have a tenant that could pay that, and that would easily be lease space that could be affordable. So not having an occupancy permit, that's just getting inspections down there and saying, here's what we need. So prior to just condemning it to demolition, it's a relatively new building. It was built with current standards. Again, the plumbing and all those other things are already there. And I think probably by the time we got the rail car done, it was probably closer to $100,000 to move that rail car, to put the art on it, to get the sewer and water right to, and yet we have something that already has all those amenities. And then we're going to put grass in that we now have to mow and mow and mow. And how are we going to water it? Oh, well, we have to get sewer and water there. Oh, but we've already terminated it when we demolished in the building. So it really is a catch-22, but I believe a reuse would be the more appropriate cause. I'm not opposing purchasing the building and acquiring it for like I said, the intended use, but then also saying transients. No, if we have a tenant in there, then there's not the transient aspect because there are eyes on the street, which we continue to talk about downtown. And so so that's the aspect to me, is saying, where are we? And then I did notice later there's not a public comment, so I don't know if that's later, if there's actually one on this agenda, but if it's just ending the meeting. So where there is at the end of city council meeting. But like I said, with regards to this, I think that finding a tenant in there for that reasonable of a price is pretty advantageous.
Thanks, Travis.
Thanks.
Angel Castillo. I am not opposed to the purchase of this property. I see how it fits in with the vision with the city, but I do, however, really don't like spending demolition money or money on a property when we don't have a signed development agreement in place. We have lots and lots of things to pay for within the city, and I was opposed to the demolition of the $600,000 being put into the hostess building without a development agreement. I think we can look at empty buildings that we own in a more creative fashion by working with nonprofits, utilizing that particular space, having them pay insurance and utilities, and knowing that it is a month to month, saying what could we do with an empty building in the community to provide someone with an opportunity for low-cost childcare, low-cost micro-incubation for businesses. I mean, there are any of the major nonprofits we have in our community that are really successful have property that was given to them. So while we may not give this property, perhaps we could let them use this property for insurance and utilities at a super low cost, knowing that they have to vacate within 60 or 90 days when we do have someone who's going to purchase the property. I encourage you to think more creatively with what we're doing with all of the empty properties that we have. And what they could be within our community, and what nonprofits can do with space and an opportunity at a sub-market rate. Thank you.
Anyone else care to comment on this item? Okay. See no motion, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion then that we adopt Resolution 2019. Yes, sir.
Close the public hearing.
Oh, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing. Second. Thanks. Getting a little late.
You're welcome. Yeah. We have a motion by board member Heyer, second by board member Blair, to close the public hearing. This is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. The public hearing is closed. We can entertain action on the
Chair?
Yeah.
Can I ask Mr. Cooper a quick question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you address the comments of people that came and spoke about that idea, please?
Sure. Whenever we buy a building, we always do that analysis. Do we keep it? Do we let it go? The city is not in a good position to be a landlord, although we are in very few cases. The majority of the cases, we choose not to be a landlord. We're just not good at it. We're not set up to do that. Case in point, in terms of listing it for occupancy, we have what is now probably 40,000 square feet of vacant space up on 24th and Monroe that we own. I understand
half of that is really old and would need lots of upgrades, but the other half was just vacated last year, and we've had that listed for probably 6 months with 0 takers. And so this building is about that same size, maybe a better location. So with the upgrades that are necessary, there's water damage. There are some improvements that would need to be made. We've taken our code guys and our building inspectors down there. We've had a contractor look at it. And so although they're not super significant into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're tens of thousands. And so when we look at that in terms of our desire to not want to be a landlord, the demand that we think is there, and the fact that we would be putting old wine in a new bottle, so to speak, if you understand that concept, meaning we know we're going to demolish the building eventually. And so when you look at the number of years that could be used beneficially based on the amount of money that would be necessary to do that, it just doesn't make any sense for us to do that. In this case, St. Anne's. I'm not saying that's for every case, but in the case of St. Anne's, it makes more sense. When we demolish the building, water would remain. We'll still have a house meter that would be left so we can tap into the water. The bill would come to us. We'd be able to water grass easily. There wouldn't be a need for the sewer, so that would be capped. Gas would be capped. Those wouldn't be needed. But we would have all the utilities there necessary to not only maintain the lot as turf, but also build the new building there in the event that we wanted to do that. So we've looked at it. We always look at these scenarios. We're landlords in some cases. It just doesn't work in every case. Thank you.
If we did clear the building, would that increase or improve the value proposition to future developers?
Knowing that the building is not going to be incorporated into the new plan, then yes, it's demolishing the building for somebody will be a liability, whether it's us now, whether it's a developer in the future, whether it's the RDA as an entity providing an incentive. The cost of that has to be borne by somebody. And the rent that would be received in the interim just wouldn't be enough to justify pushing that off, nor would it be justify the expense that would be necessary to get it occupiable right now. Again, we have vacant buildings that are open and ready to be occupied by folks, and they just stay vacant. So adding one more under our watch where we are responsible for maintaining it is just not smart in our analysis.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask another. My dad used to use a phrase. He says, talking about horses, they've been rode hard and put away wet. Does that apply to this building?
It's certainly seen better days. It's not as bad as some of the buildings that we see. Again, with some work, it could be occupied. It hasn't been, vacant for 2 years now, I think is when they built the new center. So when no one's in the building watching it and maintaining it, those tend to take a hard nose.
Okay, thanks.
I think your dad used that one differently than my dad, but we'll go with it.
I'm going to use that.
Can I ask another question? I'm sorry. So do you have any sort of estimate about when a development agreement or when we might come up with the plans? You said we're starting this design planning tomorrow. Can you give us an idea of the time period?
All I can speculate on is regarding the time that it's going to take to produce a campus master plan. So we've projected that out for the rest of this year. There's a lot of public outreach that we want to conduct to make sure that we're allowing folks to really participate in this kind of once-in-a-lifetime thing. Right. Maybe for some, that's twice in a lifetime. So we project the end of the year, we'll have a master plan, and we have been inhibited on recruiting development partners and capital because there's just no plan. It's a massive undertaking when you factor in the historic renovation of the building, potential new development to the south on the vacant land, the incorporation of the UTA land to the north. All of that is what we have deemed the campus. So from 22nd down to 27th. That's in our minds the campus and the subject of the planning effort. So it's humongous and it will be amazing. But once we have the plan, then we'll start that process of recruiting a development team.
One more question, I swear.
Okay.
Where would a person find out about how to get involved in this design plan?
We are going to set that out tomorrow, and then we hope to
launch it.
you up, brother.
Yeah, launch it publicly in the next few weeks. We're going to use the farmers market. I can tell you that we're going to use the farmers market as kind of the launch pad for what we're discussing internally as a stakeholder group.
Okay. Thank you, Brandon.
Yep.
Ready for a motion now?
Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion then that we adopt Resolution 2019-10.
Second.
We have a motion by Board Member Heyer, second by Board Member White to adopt proposed resolution 2019-10. This is a roll call vote.
Board Member Blair?
Aye.
Board Member Heyer?
Aye.
Board Member Lopez?
Aye.
Board Member Stevens?
Aye.
Board Member White?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chaburka?
Aye.
Chair Nadolski?
Aye. That passes.
I'll make another motion then that we adopt Resolution 2019-11.
Second.
We have a motion by Board Member Heyer, second by Board Member Chaburka to adopt proposed resolution 2019-11. This is a roll call vote.
Board Member Heyer?
Aye.
Board Member Lopez?
Aye.
Board Member Stevens?
Aye.
Board Member White?
Aye.
Board Member Blair?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chaburka?
Aye.
Chair Nadolski?
Aye. That also passes.
I just waited for somebody else if they wanted to turn, but I'll make another motion that we adopt Resolution 2019-12.
Second.
I have another motion by Board Member Heyer, second by Board Member Blair to adopt proposed resolution 2019-12. This too is a roll call vote.
Board Member Lopez?
Aye.
Board Member Stevens?
Aye.
Board Member White?
Aye.
Board Member Blair?
Aye.
Board Member Heyer?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chaburka?
Aye.
Chair Nadolski?
Aye. That also passes.
And I guess I'll make the last motion that we adopt Resolution 2019-13.
Second.
We have a final motion by Councilman or Board Member Heyer, second by Board Member Lopez to adopt proposed resolution 2019-13. This too is a roll call vote.
Board Member Stevens?
Aye.
Board Member White?
Aye.
Board Member Blair?
Aye.
Board Member Heyer?
Aye.
Board Member Lopez?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chaburka?
Aye.
Chair Nadolski?
Aye. That also passes. Next item on our agenda, comments from Executive Director.
I would just add, this is a lot more than just a real estate transaction. I know that Mr. Cooper, you and company have been working on this whole project plan for well over a decade. So I want to congratulate you on it. I know how dynamic it's been, and we appreciate the hard work. Thank you.
Comments from board members.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment to sort of the constituents that made comment about keeping the building, not keeping the building, and I think in this particular case, I just decided to vote for that loan and purchase, the budget amendment, all those things. Just because of, the things that Brandon set out around the planning and the future prospects for that area. So I wouldn't always agree with that, but in this particular case, I did.
Thank you. Comments from other board members? There are none. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Second.
Don't answer too quickly. We have a motion by Board Member Lopez, second by Board Member White to adjourn. This is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.